All right, Kingkillers, we're covering chapters 41 through 44 in this episode. Got some great ones. We're going to learn more about the Duke of Gibea and the Amyr, what's up with Master Lorren, Fela makes herself a ring, and Kvothe shows Kilvin his arrow catch. We also talk about some pranks from the great almighty powerful Grey Dalcenti. I tell you about a night where I got a standing ovation in a fancy restaurant, and you're going to learn how to handle friends who don't like our podcast. So sit back and enjoy.
Surround if the devil wanna flee, I got a scope zoomed in on the sniper in the trees. I'ma surround if the devil wanna flee, I got a scope zoomed in on the sniper in the trees.
All right, welcome back to the Kingkiller podcast. I'm Dan, got Tim with me here again. Unfortunately, he's still around, still to throw out his terrible opinions and any bad advice he's got on life.
I have varied levels of advice. Some good, some bad, some indifferent. Should take all of it for sure. Yeah,
I haven't heard any of the good yet. I'm still waiting for that good to kick in.
No, you know that's not true.
Got to mix it up. Add in some good advice with the bad. Starting to become one note.
Okay, all right. I'll step it up. I'll step up the advice giving because that's what people are listening to me for. Is for me to give life lesson advice rather than picking things up from Rothfuss.
Yeah, I think that's what the main thing that they're looking for out of us is, how to live their life.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of it. They should be picking up already. But yeah, we'll weave it in a little bit further, Yeah,
I've been dropping dimes. It's just shooting a lot of air balls, kind of, dropping us down to 50%, which is not that great.
Well, you have to shoot your shot, Yeah. That's the most important thing.
Well, yeah, I guess.
There's lesson number one.
You're like Sim, and I'm like Kvothe if he was shooting his shot.
No, but my point is you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. Right, Dan?
Yep, by Wayne Gretzky quoted Michael Scott.
Yeah, so Michael Scott said it most recently.
Yeah, Michael Scott once said you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah, but I said it most recently.
Oh, yeah, so I guess it's Tim said you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott.
If I remember right, when he puts that up there, he sits postured proud.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things ever. He's got Wayne Gretzky's name real small and then his name big as shit. He's quoting someone else's quote. It's amazing.
Well, I delivered it.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing is I recognize the genius in it. You're welcome.
Such a great character. But I guess we finished off with Puppet in chapter 40 last week. So this week we start off with chapter 41, The Greater Good. In this chapter, Kvothe shows Sim a book by Gibea and how the creed of the Amyr on the scrollwork implies he was a secret member of the Amyr and that they still exist that they likely still exist in secret today. He also talks shit to a couple loud jerks, causing them to leave, and then gets suspended from the archives for 5 days.
Yeah, this really carries where the last couple episodes have been moving, which is we've been teasing that back and forth, this idea of the greater good and the complexity that it brings to the world with the Amyr versus the Chandrian and how they overlap in terms of their purposes and how the gray area comes in with the judgment of the greater good, that that dirty stinking omelet that you make by breaking those eggs, right?
Yeah. And because of the saying, the Invari Enum Uge, that is what Lorren says to him, is the creed of the Amyr. When he first gets to university and he's having them look up books for him on the Amyr, And then Lorren's like, hey, you're going to look like a little kid looking this stuff up. And he's like, but I can satisfy your curiosity. And then he tells him that Invari Enum Uge was there. They're sane. So the fact that it's on the outside scroll of that Gibea book, you would think that that's something that Lorren would, recognize, that would stand out to him as well.
That whole exchange seems a lot more suspicious now.
Yeah.
To me. I mean, and it was back then, and you pointed that out, but yeah, especially knowing what we know now, yeah, he had a real purpose there. It wasn't just, you're going to look a little foolish because you already are young, and he had really good tact, Lorren, when he approached the way he approached Kvothe and the way he approached the subject, but that again makes it even more suspicious because of the underlying motivational factors that he had, right?
Yeah, and he's just so Johnny on the spot. Like, I mean, and none of the scribs were telling those kids to quiet down, but they went and got Lorren to tattle on Kvothe. Like, I mean, why does he know? I mean, if they went to tattle on Kvothe, why didn't they go and say something to those kids? And then why, does Lorren really need to, have, go grab Kvothe himself and then get that book from him? There's enough there. Like, I mean, it could just be as simple as that. It could be that Lorren just was going to tell Kvothe to get out of there. It's just happenstance, that, it's that book's important and it's got a saying in there that he would recognize as the Amyr. And there's reasons to suspect that he's the Amyr, but it could just be coincidences too. It's just, I doubt it. I think that the fact, all the other evidence, I think it points at that this is likely him trying to squash information.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it follows that same suspicion because, it's a good point. There's scribs in there that this is their responsibility. It's not Lorren's responsibility to get involved. I mean,
when he was when he was lighting the candle in the archives, they didn't just like come and, wait here, we'll go get Lorren. They drug him out. And so you would think like if this was like some big deal that they would just go and grab Kvothe and like, hey, we got to bring you to Lorren. You're not supposed to be doing this. And that they would have taken care of it. Like Sim said, the Scrubs would have taken care of it. And, it seemed you would think that they would be able to handle telling Kvothe he's got to fucking dip out for 5 days or he's got to go see Lorren. For Lorren to need to go in there and collect that book from him. It just makes it gives it that layer of suspicion. And when you add on the other reasons we have to suspect that Lorren is a Amyr, this is just adding another brick to that pile.
Yeah, I mean, especially again picking up from their whole initial run-in, or what you talked about earlier, that whole discussion where he's basically squashing him, looking into because he's seeing all the things that he's looking for. Although it also sort of brings up the question of how does he know he has the book? Is there something going on there? Like, he's like just in tune with like what's being perused, like, I don't know. Again, it could just be happenstance, but
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it could be that, there's a scrib there that knows what's going on that, heard him say that saying and then went and grabbed the master. But I don't know. I don't know why he showed up there. It's not certain that he showed up because, he wanted to get that book from Kvothe. It's just that possibility is there. And with the other reasons to think that he might be a Amyr, it just kind of adds up. But I like the aspect too that when he shows the book to Sim, like Sim freaks the hell out.
Yeah.
He's he's like, get that thing away from me. Yeah. He's like, an
keeps,
original.
Yeah.
Merciful Telu is probably written on human skin. Get it away from me. Kvothe, I almost joked how human skin probably wouldn't take ink, but decided against it when I saw the expression on Sim's face. Still, my expression must have given me away. You're perverse, he spat, his voice almost rising to unacceptable levels. God's mother, do you know he cut apart living men to watch their organs work? I refuse to look at anything that monster was responsible for.
Yeah, and this is a great comparative example of for the greater good, because Kvothe brings up, all right, well, you might as well stop studying medicine, because Gibea's research of the human body was the most thorough ever done. His journals are the backbone of modern physics. So yeah, I mean, it takes it down that path of like, yeah, maybe that's what he did, and everybody. It seems to me, and I know we kind of talked about this, but it seems to me that when there's this infamy connected to characters, they end up becoming a character in itself, or almost a caricature of what their history entails. You know what I mean? Like I would imagine he probably wasn't as big a monster as they make him out to be, but now anything horrid and disastrous, and when he goes down in Trappist's place, it's like something from the Duke of Gibea. It's like a dungeon, anything that has that feel. It's like this is the boogeyman type story in their world to a degree. He's like the Hitler or something, or the Mengele, to be more accurate, of their world. But someone like Kvothe who appreciates, or who is looking at this from a more level-headed manner, because he doesn't have what Kvothe finds out Sim's history and how his own family was involved, his own relatives died. Kvothe doesn't have that feeling, so he's more looking at it from a more even keel perspective of, but yes, that's horrid, but look at all these great things that we got out of it. So again, greater good type dichotomy, weird situation, which again, I like it, because it's difficult to, there's not a loose, there's not like a clean bow that ties this all up. You can take one side, you can take the other side, and it's pretty grimy, right? Either way.
Yeah, it's very much an ends justify the means type of attitude, which I don't agree with. And I think it's good that we get the Adem later on in the books who take a completely opposite approach on that thing. The means is the most important thing to them. The ends, is not, that, if you have to take terrible means to get to a good end, then, it's not worth it. So they take a very, very different approach to it. And so it's good, Kvothe is real focused with the Amyr, and the, ends justifies the means approach. And then he has to spend some time with the Adem who take that philosophy head on.
I mean, again, that's what I find so interesting about the subject, is that's very real to our world, how we live our own lives, right? We can try to justify, we can use the ends justify the means, but then, yeah, the question ends up becoming, what kind of life are you leading? And if you are more principled, and that's what's kind of happening here, is Sim's giving the more principled approach to an extreme level, right? I think that's fair to say, versus Kvothe, who's literally just looking at the end result and kind of being unbiased, or at least trying to be. Which is, it's an interesting way to look at the subject, because the concept in itself is, it's hard. That's the way the world is. The world isn't clear cut. It isn't simple. It's complex, and there are these greater good type situations and questions that come up. Those are all the military conquest questions, right? That's why you have to many times create a boogeyman, create an enemy in people's minds to be able to justify what you're about to, enlist people to go do. That's some dirty ass omelets, man.
It's similar to
there's been some really nasty food fights.
It's similar
basically.
To the Chandrian. What the Chandrian are doing. They obviously seems like Haliax has a means, and he justifies what he's doing to accomplish those means in a similar way, where it doesn't seem like, Haliax or Lanre believes what he's doing is just pure evil, that he's just like an evil Skeletor figure that is just doing evil for evil's sake. It seems like he's got a purpose, and he thinks he's doing the right thing, that what he's doing is going to result in the least amount of suffering, at least. and he's willing to cause suffering to much in the way Gibea is in order to achieve an end.
And we were so close to finding out what that was. So close.
Yeah.
When Arladin was about to tell us, and we didn't get it. And it was so early on where it's like, I think I found out what they're up to. I think I know what it is. Please tell. No. I have wrote a song about it. You're gonna have to wait till the mixtape's done, then you'll get it. But yeah, it's.
I don't know what it is. It's. I mean, obviously, a significant portion of what they're trying to do is to make yoga pants a thing. That's clear. But outside that, I don't have a lot of good guesses. It seems like, unless we just go with what Scarpy says, and then it seems pretty clear that they're trying to end the world, and they believe the world is suffering, or at least Haliax does, and so he believes that if we just end existence, he's just super emo, nihilistic, person.
What it seems is, from what we've seen thus far, it seems like Haliax is suffering. He's using the Chandrian as his tools to bring more suffering and to end and to continue. It doesn't. I mean, I guess it's very acute the way they approach it, because they're not just weighing lace to people randomly. It seems to be there's a pot involved, or they're talking about us, and so there seems to be a purpose. But what's the end? Is the end just kill people who talk about us? I mean,
and like with Cinder, is what is Cinder doing in the Eld? Is that part of Haliax's purpose? Is Cinder just doing his own thing? Do they need to create a civil war between the mayor and the Calanthus kingdom, the Vents?
Maybe
what is Cinder doing in the Eld? I mean, it's not clear. It seems like he's trying to stir shit up between the mayor and Calanthus, but why? Is that his purpose, or is that Haliax's purpose? What's going on there?
I think that's what the interesting thing about the Fae. I think when people go in there, they just see there's random postings where you can hire mercenaries, and Cinder's just one of them. He's just one random mercenary you can hire. When you go into the Fae, everything levels out. So you can just hire him for stuff. You can have
he's just he's like a really good mentor for wayward people who've gone down a bad path. He gets them to be professional criminals.
Takes them all the way down.
Brings them to a higher echelon of criminality.
So who brings the blue flame? I can't remember his name.
Sturgis is in Thrall of Iron. Yeah. I'm drawing a blank on it.
Whoever it is. So they just hire him for fireworks shows. You can just hire him, and he'll get stuff going. And then you can get Grey Dalcenti to show up to just look cool.
Yeah.
So they hire him out. I'm trying to think of other things they would be hired for, but I'm kind of.
He does
there's something about utility and having someone show up to kill.
He does the Fonzie thing. He hangs out in bars, where Fonzie would hit the jukebox and make it start playing.
Well, I guess actually he'd be really useful.
He hits the musician when he starts to fall asleep. He just smacks him, gets him back playing again.
He'd be really useful for pranks. So if you have a friend that's a farmer and you want to play a prank on him, you just have Grey Dalcenti show up, start talking, all the animals start going fucking crazy, killing each other and shit.
Yeah.
It's a good prank.
Yeah, it's hilarious. Yeah, hilarious. He made your dogs eat each other. That's so funny. You're going to be so sad. It's going to be so funny.
The dogs literally try to eat the owner. Bites his leg off.
That Grey Dalcenti, man. Great prankster. Great pranks. Really good at pranks.
It's also the guy that hired him is pretty vicious as well.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what Crazy Martin, everybody thinks Crazy Martin's crazy. He's just hanging out with Grey Dalcenti or something.
Yeah. He fell victim to one of old Gray's pranks. Cracked him.
Old Gray.
But yeah, so Sim is all tore up. It turns out, I guess, that Gibea was performing these, experimenting on living bodies in Sim's family's, ancestral land.
20,000 pits of bones and ashes, women and children, 20,000 people. But again, the argument holds water both ways, because what does he come back with? Well, Gibea wrote 23 volumes concerning the machinery of the body. It's like, what? There's a lot of use in that. But you're also talking about, women, children, men, 20,000 dead. And it wasn't in battle. It was literally like tearing these people apart. That's brutal.
Yeah, you would think, there are other ways to figure that kind of stuff out without, chopping people up into pieces.
Yeah, people die every day, right?
Yeah.
You can do experiments on cadavers, which is, what we tend to do in our world.
Yeah. But, it doesn't seem all that necessary. Great. It helped them understand it, but once you cut a living person up, how long are you keeping them alive at that point? Like, so you get to see the body inside of the body working for like 5 minutes.
That's kind of brutal. If you, it's kind of gross. It's kind of weird to take it this way, but if you can picture, well, I don't know. I guess you could do your best to keep the person alive, and that's what people do when they torture people, right? They're trying to keep the body alive as they're torturing. That's brutal.
I'm sure you'd have to be putting someone under. You couldn't just start like cutting them up while they're just laying there screaming. Yeah, they're gonna fucking die. But you'd have to have some kind of anesthesia to knock them out. But how good is it? As far as cutting someone up and that kind of stuff, it just doesn't seem like you would gain enough information where it would be clearly the most beneficial way to acquire this knowledge. Seems like there could be other methods. I haven't researched, chopping up bodies and stuff and like how useful it is, but it doesn't seem like it would be so useful that, piling up corpses of children would be, a path that, I would go down. I don't think I would do it.
Yeah. So, and then that also, so Gibea gets his deserved notoriety, right?
Yeah.
So
hey,
that's why
fucking experimenting on children. Like, all right, dude, I don't care how many lives you saved, like what you did to those lives. It's,
what you did to get there.
And think of it this way: like how many lives could those? Yeah, your experiments. Okay, the medical knowledge has saved X amount of lives, but what about the 20,000 people he killed? How many of those people would have done something to save a life, or created something, or made a farm that fed, a bunch of people, that kind of stuff. Like you're subtracting what they would have accomplished from the equation. You're only looking at his actions and the direct. You're not looking at the unseen, the like indirect results of what he did.
Well, and that points to the ultimate question of the greater good. Who decides?
Yeah, and
who's the arbiter of what is worth? You don't know. There's no perfect knowledge.
No.
And Gibea certainly doesn't have access to it.
No, and another thing too is like if you found out that there's this doctor that was just experimenting on living people, chopping them up, just stacking bodies, how many people didn't go to a doctor after that?
Yeah.
How far back
like
did he set ages. Like the people? Like like those kind of things. That's gonna stick with somebody. They're these doctors are psychopaths,
Well, and this is hundreds. It's not 1,000 years ago. This is hundreds of years ago. The Duke of Gibea, right?
Yeah, not all that long ago.
Yeah, because Sim's reaction is still very. He's kind of an emotional dude and all, but still, it seems like in his culture, they're still it's very much alive. That intense pain and anger towards it, which it should last, but yeah, it's some brutal history, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's messed up, and
it's probably makes a lot of sense for Rothfuss to also pit that against these idiots talking too loud. Sort of a little comic relief, not really comic, but lighten the mood of the subject a little bit.
Yeah, and I like too though the aspect, like it talks about the scroll work around the edges, and we've heard about the scroll work on one of the poems he read about the Chandrian, and I'm guessing that there is, when he says like you'd be surprised what you find hidden in children's songs, betting that scroll work was a hidden clue.
So that was early on when he first got into the archives, right? Where he's doing a whole bunch of...
Because the poem, the poem paints the Chandrian as like the, good guys. They're, surprisingly, they're good to us, or whatever the stupid saying was. But it was just like, it's the opposite of what we see on screen with the Chandrian. And so, like, I bet you that the important information hidden there is the scroll work.
Yeah, didn't it paint him as like just sort of mischievous, but also, it did say, but they do good or something. But
they're good to us.
Tell you. Yeah, they just threw that in there. Yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, that would be a good point, that it would be the real message would possibly be hidden in the scroll work then. That sounds cool.
Yeah,
be cool to see.
Because that scroll work comes up a number of times, and this is the first time that he actually examined it and made a point of it.
And it's an ancient Tema? Is that the idea? It's an ancient language?
Yeah, it's not Timic. I pointed out it's Tema, an archaic usage. What is it even supposed to say? He looked up from his book, his brow creasing. Towards greater good. Shook my head. For the greater good. I corrected. Sound familiar? Yeah, and then we get the two big jerks, big jerk faces. And they come in, they're, I told you I can't tonight. Maybe I'm felling. I'll be free on felling. You should go before then, I told him. The 2 pennies crowded felling night. They gave me irritated looks. Mind your own business, slipstick, the taller one said.
Slipstick.
That got my back up even more. Sorry you weren't talking. I'm sorry you weren't talking to me. Did it look like I was talking to you? He said scathingly. Sounded like it, I said. If I can hear you 3 tables away, you must want me to be a part of your conversation. Cleared my throat. The only alternative is that you're too thick to keep your voice down in the tomes. His face flushed red, and he probably would have replied, but his friend said something in his ear, and they both gathered their books and left. There was a quiet scattering of applause as the door closed behind them. I gave my audience a smile and a wave. I like that aspect of it where, like, the one clearly gets heated, and he's about to say something, and his friend more than likely is like, yo, that's that kid. And they're like, fuck. Yeah, let's just get the fuck out of here.
As much as I like that Kvothe shuts them up and does the right thing, his grandstanding always, it just bothers me. Like, and it probably says a lot about me that I have a problem with stuff like that. But, that fact that he has to smile and wave to his audience. Mm. Again, I don't know. It reminded me when he pointed or, like, held up his, what are they called? His pipes. Not exactly Dame Lillard.
I don't know.
The shot.
At that restaurant, I got my standing ovation.
Yeah.
I got everybody to stand and give me a standing ovation. Sometimes you gotta pump it up.
Yeah, well, that was definitely a different.
Have we told that? Did we tell that story? I think we probably have.
Not on the podcast. Not on the podcast. I think we tweeted about it or something.
Oh, well, this was this is a classic. Me and Tim were drinking at some bars, and then we were leaving, walking home, and we walked by this sushi restaurant, and I look in, and it used to be like a club, and so there's a big pole in the middle of the restaurant, and so I give Tim, my iPad or whatever, and ask him to hold it, and then I'm wearing like a suit from work, and so. And I just walk in there and immediately go to the pole and just start swinging around it and just staring at everybody as I swing around this pole like I'm stripping.
Well, it's important to know it's a nice restaurant. People are dressed nicely and they're all sitting down eating dinner. It's not a hangout club place. No one's standing. There's no bar.
No, yeah, I mean, it immediately everybody turns and's like looking at me like, what the fuck is this dude doing? And so I did it a few times. I just swung it around, but then I was just staring at everybody as I'm like spinning around. I'm just like staring them all in the eye as I go around. And then like I do it about 2 or 3 times, and then I stand up, and then I just start waving my hands above my head, like, telling everybody stand up and applaud me. Like, give it to me. Give it to me. And I got everybody in that restaurant to stand up and give me an applause. And then I walked out of the restaurant and left.
It was an uproarious standing ovation.
Yeah.
And I was dumbfounded. I was standing there because literally you didn't say, you were like, hey, hang on to this for a second. Okay. Yeah. And you go inside, you do this, come back out. You're kind of laughing, but you still, I don't know, man, you always look serious. So it was like, what the hell just happened? Like, what was that?
Like, I don't know. I just wanted to get a standing ovation.
That's what they call a random act of kindness. You made those people's nights.
Yeah, like, I guarantee you there's people that still talk about that. Like, because we're not even joking. Like, it was literally like standing up, people cheering and clapping and cheering me as I'm walking out of the place.
No, it was an ovation. It was a standing ovation. People grinning ear to ear, laughing, clapping. It was one of the most surprising things I've ever witnessed. And I really genuinely hope people left that night and were like, dude, we got to go back next week. They do this thing.
Yeah, they thought it's a part. They probably like hired someone to start doing that. Like, we gotta fucking find someone to do that.
The place didn't last. It ended up being a bar.
It went back to a bar. It started out as a bar, and then it became like a nice sushi restaurant, and then it must have went back.
It was like a club, and then it was a sushi restaurant, and then it went to being like a pub.
What's funny is if I had done that when it was a club, I would have got no reaction.
Yeah. Yeah, you would have probably got, or it would have been like, people, what's wrong with this fucking dude?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
They would have just thought I was like, obliterated.
Yeah, it's the fact that it's a nice sushi restaurant. It makes a big difference that you're dressed like in a suit.
Yeah, it looks ridiculous.
Helps.
Yeah, yeah. So sometimes you gotta and just that is out of character for me. That is not something I would do on a normal situation. I don't know why. I have no idea why I did it. I just felt an urge and I just acted on it.
It also helps that you have like this deadpan look on your face.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, I don't know what else to say about it. It was shocking to everyone, including me. Completely. I was just like random as fuck. Like, that's the thing. There was no premeditation. It was like, I'm going to go do this now. It was literally like, hold on to this. You might as well have been like, I'm going to pull out a cigarette.
Yeah. Yeah, I had not 5 seconds before that. I had not thought that I was going to do that. It occurred to me in the moment, and I just acted on it. I don't know why.
In retrospect, I probably have to think my expectation was probably, he's probably going to the bathroom. That would be a rational thought. I was pretty drunk, so I don't remember wholeheartedly, or clearly what exactly what my thought was, but those thoughts went away quick because you started swinging around a freaking pole.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous, but I makes me relate to Kvothe. I understand that desire to sometimes you got to get a standing ovation.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And sometimes you just got to shake them up. Well, in that circumstance it was different because that actually made the situation. Of course, you could have just walked out and been like, "What?" But yeah, it made it a real event at that point, for sure.
But yeah, so
it's too bad you weren't trying to promote something. By the way, if you were, you could just throw in business cards.
Yeah.
I will be hired. It was like you work for like a law firm.
Yeah, start spraying business cards at everybody. Like, hold on, this dude's a lawyer. What?
Well, there would be certain professions where that would be like, I want that guy. Probably not that.
No, I don't think lawyer would be like a good one for that. But there's not many professions. Like, what, a clown? Like
I was
what?
gonna say stand-up comedian. I don't know, like random acts of ridiculousness.
Yeah, there's
It's
not
like
a high demand
Jackass
for
audition.
for random acts of idiocy.
It'd be good if you did have cars that just you were a lawyer, but it was all bird law.
Yeah, yeah. Hit
That's
me
your
up if you need
specialty.
any bird law expertise.
Oh, shit.
Fun times. But yeah, so he hams it up, and then he tells, explains his theory to Sem, which I think is probably accurate. Is that Gibea, it was probably a secret member of the Amyr, and if he was, then it's likely that there were more secret members of the Amyr, and that when they got disbanded, they didn't just disappear; they just went into hiding.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, Sim doesn't make those connections. Kvothe does, and they're what I was thinking is it's a pretty great application of deductive reasoning where he just kind of takes it down. So if that's the case, then this, then this. Yeah, and it's funny because Sim's like everything's about the Amyr with you these days. Like what's like because he keeps and like that's what we've been saying over the past few chapters. That's what he's been focusing on because he's getting these little pieces. And of course it would be because he's starting to learn about it and he's piecing them together. And then he pieces a lot together right here. And then right as he pieces it together, who shows up? But whom we think is a member of the Amyr.
Yeah, yeah, and comes up to him, tells him, speaking with students at other tables is not permitted. He said from behind me, "You're suspended for 5 days." Expressionless Master Lorren reached out a long hand toward me. I handed Gibea's journal over without comment, and a minute later we were blinking in the chill of winter sunlight outside the archive doors. Pulled my nerdy cloak around me and stomped the snow off my feet. But yeah, so there's plenty of reasons to think that Lorren could be a Amyr. This is one of those situations. Doesn't necessarily mean that it is, that he is and this is related, but there are plenty of reasons to believe that he came because of the book Kvothe was reading, rather than just talking loud in the archives.
Well, and it, like we said earlier, it connects to the other conversations that he's had with them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's it's just another piece of evidence that adds into the other evidence that we already have.
Yeah, and then Sim tells him, it's like, I was just trying to do the right thing. Simon laughed as we began to walk slowly in the direction of anchors. He kicked playfully at a small drift of snow. "The world needs people like you," Simon said in a tone of a voice that let me know he was turning philosophical. "You get things done. Not always in the best way or the most sensible way, but it gets done nonetheless. You're a rare creature." "How do you mean?" I asked. "Like today, something bothers you, someone offends you, and suddenly you're off." He made a quick motion with a flat hand. "You know exactly what to do. You never hesitate. You just see and react." He was thoughtful for a moment. "I imagine that's the way the Amyr used to be. Small wonder folk were frightened of them." "I'm not always so terribly sure of myself," I admitted. Simon smiled. "I find that strangely reassuring." Which I think that's accurate description of Kvothe.
Yeah, the interesting connection is he happens to be a man of action. He pays the price immediately. Right? In this case. And he pays, throughout. The best example is with Ambrose. And he's a hero to people at the university because he's the only one willing to do it. And it's not a good idea. He's kicking a hornet's nest every single time. It's nearly gotten him killed a number of times. And, that's probably only going to get worse. Probably only going to get worse as we go through the books, but, and even go into book 3. I imagine Ambrose doesn't just give up, right?
No, I think there's going to be a big confrontation between them. I would be surprised if what happens with the broken cobblestones, whatever they talk about in one of the first chapters in chapter 3 of Name of the Wind, I'd be surprised if that's not Ambrose.
Well, what I think happens
you would
there.
think that, I mean, obviously, that's that's the most obvious one. So it could go a different way to not be obvious, but sometimes the obvious is the best. The reason it's obvious is because it's the best choice. And I think a confrontation between an ultimate confrontation between Ambrose and Kvothe is needed for book 3.
Well, I think what clearly happens is that happens, and then they get the band together, and they start doing those poetry slams together.
That's after the poetry slam. That's the unfortunate part. They become good buddies, really mend fences, start their poetry, but then all the girls start throwing themselves at it.
He makes a move on Denna. That's what happens.
Yeah. He puts a mirror on his shoe and looks up Denna's dress. Kvothe loses it. Calls the name of
that's my girl. He literally yells, "That's my girl."
Yeah.
And then and then he calls the name of the wind and stone and a few other things, and boom, shit gets.
And mirror. He calls the name of Amyr and uses that mirror on his shoe to like pick him up, slam him down.
So by the mirror itself spins him up and around. I like that image. Yeah. He starts spinning around like he's in a fucking washing machine.
He has the mirror like grow and expand all around Ambrose's body. Then he takes a baseball bat and smashes it.
Whoa. There you go. Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be intense.
It sounds intense, yeah.
Which is why I always say you should not put a mirror on your shoe and look up girls' dresses. It's always a bad idea.
Hold on, that's the reason though?
Yeah.
That's
because you never know. Like someone could have the power to control that mirror and kill you with it.
There are reasons. The funny thing, if it wasn't for Spencer Gifts, I probably never would have. That was definitely the introduction to the idea of a mirror to look up a skirt was Spencer Gifts. They had some, you know what I'm talking about, right? They had some stupid cane or something, and that on the bottom it had like an extended mirror. It's like, what the hell's that? And then, oh, okay.
It's kind of a wasted. There's not that much payoff, especially in today's age. Like maybe if you're in the ridiculous. 80s or whatever. Like
it's ridiculous. It's always been ridiculous. It's just an absurd idea of like, wait, really? That's what? Okay, I
do think it would be hilarious if like if it was like a big thing in Scotland or whatever, and there's like guys wearing kilts and girls are doing it to guys. Get a peek at the undercarriage. Like, oh,
Jesus,
what an awful payoff.
Yeah, gross.
That'd at least be funny though.
It's kind of funny. It's absurd.
All the Scottish guys like, come on, stop it. Stop looking at my balls.
That's not right.
They're always looking at my balls and laughing.
This is so ridiculous. How did we get here?
What
the fuck?
You do some stupid things sometimes.
I do. I did not take it there. Holy shit.
All right, so chapter 42 is titled Penance. And in this chapter, Kvothe goes and attempts to make peace with Devi. Goes traveling in the cold. Comes in looking all sick. And then when she finds out she was responsible for giving Kvothe the plumb bob, they call it even, make up, and they end up returning to their original deal.
Yeah, it's I like the start. It kind of reminds me when I was younger, at least, that he gets a chance to catch up on a month of lost sleep. It's like, dude, there's no way, man. Like if I have a few days where I'm getting a little bit less sleep than is necessary, it's like my fucking shit shuts down. Like I'll literally get sick.
And if catching up on sleep, it's like if I haven't been sleeping, like there might be like a time where like I go to sleep and I'm out for like 10 hours, but I'm not the next day. I'm not sleeping another 10 hours. Then I'm back on my schedule after that. Yeah. Yeah. There's no catching up. Like, it's one, other than, one night to catch up maybe, but yeah, there's only so much sleeping you can do. But I like that he goes and tries to pay Ari a visit, but everything's covered in ice, and he can't get into the under thing. It's locked up, and he doesn't see Ari before he leaves because he's gonna be heading out of the university fairly soon after this. So he's not gonna see Ari before he leaves. But apparently she hibernates like a bear in the under thing during winter. Doesn't come out.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess it's just been a while since I've read the next coming chapters, but I'm sure that's something he probably did worry about while he was gone, is the fact that if she can't find him, and he thinks she has this dependence on him, at least to some degree, then that's probably something that kind of weighs on his brain while he's gone,
Yeah, he doesn't really mention it, but yeah, he would think about it occasionally at least. But apparently she's fine on her own because it's not like she starves to death while he's gone.
Yeah, it's not like she was before she met him either,
No,
or before he met her. But
she seems to have her own ways. But yeah, he decides to work in the fishery. Calculating, it says, I work long hours in the fishery, calculating, running tests, casting alloys for my project. So he keeps bringing up the project and keeping it in the back of our minds. Obviously, then we're going to get to it where we see the project, but he gives us little bare mentions of it throughout in these chapters since Kilvin initially told him, like, hey, you need to do something special.
Yeah, it's interesting because Rothfuss did such a good job with that, because we're not surprised when it gets unveiled. We are to a degree because we know nothing about it. There was that little mention of the bear trap where it's like, oh yeah, I can use that, and he bought a crossbow.
But they're not mentioned in connection with his project.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's what I mean. So there's those two things that get mentioned, and we know after the fact that, oh, okay, so that's what those things were for. Leading into it, like trying to put myself in the shoes of a first reader, if I can remember, with any accuracy, it did seem like, okay, so what was that? Because that happens quite a bit. There's a lot of things that, and I've talked about that so many times, there's things you pass over and you're like, there's something more to that. I don't really know what it is, and I'm just going to keep reading. But it plants that seed in your mind, and then once you get there, it's like, oh yeah, okay. And
yeah, because initially you're thinking he's going to use it against Ambrose, but then when the shit happens with Ambrose, I doubt I was even thinking about it. I imagine that the crossbow and the bear trap had left my mind, and then when he brings it up, then it's like, oh yeah, he did mention those things.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It's so great because they're subtle. And then like this little mention, it's like 2 sentences. He was doing more calculations. Again, just a reminder that there's this project he's working on. But he doesn't mention it a lot. It's not like when he was making, when he was initially making the emitters, we were in there like with every step and how dangerous it was and how this could happen and that could happen and all these little other things. We don't get anything about this project other than those 2 things, and he's doing calculations and he's in there. But we get the great thing about it is we get the responsibility that Kilvin puts on him, right? The expectation. He like lets him know, like, I'm expecting you to do something, do something good, and he does, and he kills it. It's great. The payoff's tremendous, but we are getting ahead of ourselves towards that. I like, again, dude, Devi's so great, and her introduction here is so great to me. Her curse, Telu's tits and teeth.
Yeah. Telu's tits and teeth. It's a great curse.
It's so great, man.
What are you doing out in this?
Well, and it is wild to consider too, because it's funny. I love how honest she is, because she's like, are you just trying to make me feel a little bit less pissed because you're covered in fucking snow and like you're trembling and blue? Like, what's wrong with you? Why would you do this?
Yeah. It's not going to make me feel bad for you. And then she's like, well, no, you know what? It actually is, brightening my mood. It is helping. And I also like the the aspect of it when he gets there and he looks around and he noticed she's got a second bookshelf. It was still mostly bare, but she's starting to stack up expensive books, and that's one of the things that eventually helps him realize like the game she's playing. Like when he starts calculating how much her books are worth, and he's like, Jesus Christ, man, she's got, more money than I've ever seen just in books.
Mm.
Like, this is not a person who needs, my 6 talent loan.
That also brings up something you brought a while back. I mean, obviously the archives has way more books than she's ever going to own. And that access is extraordinarily attractive to someone like her. And she makes that clear, but it seems like there's something more. Like that hunger and that like literal, what he perceived as almost like a lust to get in the archives seemed to be about much more than just the access to the books, because she has money and she can obviously she's getting these books, getting certain books. It is obviously the archives, and it's the biggest collection in their world, as far as we know, of books that are, being, collected from all over the world and brought there. So that's very attractive. But yeah, again, it does kind of.
But like
still,
it's like, still when you look at it, it's a library, and she's got money, she could buy books. But like, it could be that she wants a specific book, but it can't just be like she just wishes she had the ability to go through and read some books like that. I can't imagine that's it, because it's not like she's just buying, a bunch of used copies of books. She's buying like first print editions, and she's like a collector. Mm-hmm. And so it's not so much that she's just stacking books just to read. She's buying specific expensive books. And if it was just a general desire for information, you would think she would just be, fucking piling up books. She would be looking for cheap books.
I guess it's that 4-plate door. I don't know.
Could be a 4-plate door, or there's some kind of specific information in the library that she wants access to that's in the archives, that's hidden, that Kvothe doesn't know about, but she knows about.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely something. There's something more. It does seem like there's something more going on there, because why would... I guess Rothfuss could show her with these bookcases, just to keep it in your mind that she wants the archives, but it brings up that there must be something else, because it's also showing that she has access to books. So...
Yeah, if my guess would be that, if she'll go at something with her and Ari, they will get behind the 4-plate door is what I think will happen. That she'll interact with Ari, or it could be like Ari escapes Devi and goes behind the 4-plate door to escape her. I don't know, but I think she will play some aspect in Kvothe needing to get behind that 4-plate door because of something she does, or she goes behind it herself. It would fit together too, like, like he went to get his heart's desire, and it could be that Ari's his heart's desire, Devi's the demon that he has to trick. I don't know who the angel would be.
So he tricks her into helping him get behind the door.
To get his heart's desire. So it could be that Ari's to get Ari back.
Maybe she's behind the door and he's, I don't know.
It could be something along those lines. Maybe it's, it obviously they could be turning that story into a fairy tale thing, like tricking, had to trick a demon to get his heart's desire. It could be something not as fairy tale story type of thing, but like the fact that she's called Demon Devi seems like her and Ari are headed for a collision, and I think Princess Ariel is likely going to be one of the princesses that he has to rescue from the Barrow King. So I could very easily see a scenario where Devi, Ari connect. Something happens where at least Ari goes behind the 4-plate door. Kvothe has to do something with Devi to be able to figure out maybe how to get back there. I don't know. I think Scarpy will play a role too. I think because I do think that Faye Renial's behind that 4-plate door, and I think Scarpy is the old man in that story. So yeah, I think there's going to be something to do with Scarpy, Devi, Ari at least, and the 4-plate door in book 3. I think that those 3 are going to play a part.
I mean, it would make sense if book 3 is the last book, that there's a culmination of things that will occur. Right? I mean, that makes a lot that makes a lot of sense to me, just in looking at literature in itself, and especially a story like this where there's so many stories that are building, and they need to come to, eventually have to end the story, right? Like there's got to be some sort of culminating factor, unless you're just going to kill everybody off. And there's another Duke of Gibea just wipes people out just to work on their organs.
Yeah, it'd be a weird choice.
Yeah, feels like it.
But yeah, then so he starts to make it up to her. He offers his little symbolic penance piece, and then he like, I've spent a lot of time trying to think of some gesture to make a suitable apology to you. She's like, you decided it would be best to walk here during the worst weather of the year. I decided it would be best if we talked. The weather was just a happy accident. And they start talking about that. He starts to explain that the part of the reason why he was acting the way he was acting is not only someone was trying to kill him, but he also had been dosed with the plum bob. I don't think he's really in his own mind blaming the plum bob for how he acted with Devi, but he's bringing it up because he knows Devi was responsible for it. So he plays that card, and then she reacts to it. She starts to deny it, but he can see through her lie. And then she's like, well, you can't prove it. He's like, look, I'm not trying to tell on you. I'm not trying to get you in trouble. I'm just letting you know that just like I fucked you over, you fucked me over.
Yeah. He's tipping the balance, he's tipping the balance at least to some degree, and giving her a little bit of feeling of guilt, which actually works. Yeah, and she lets us know that she didn't know it was for Ambrose. She says some rich Tosh came around, made a stunningly good offer, and she says she would never do business with Ambrose, and I didn't know it was for you, I swear. You knew it was for someone, I said. And so he's like, here's how I see it. Recently, we've both done something rather foolish, something we regret. I pulled the robe more closely around my shoulders. And while these two things certainly don't cancel each other out, it does seem to me that they establish some sort of equilibrium. Held up my hands as if they were balancing plates on a scale. Davy gave me a small, embarrassed smile. Perhaps I was hasty and demanding full repayment. I returned the smile and felt myself relax. How would you feel about sticking to the original terms of our loan? That seems fair. Debbie held out a hand over the desk, and I shook it. The last of the tension in the room evaporated, and I felt a long-standing piece of worry unknot itself in my chest. Yeah, it's interesting. They have the conversation that we I don't know, when reading it and they face off and all that, it's like, why don't they just talk?
Yeah.
Why don't they just have this out and have the conversation they're having now, rather than everybody's playing against each other and everybody's, trying to get one over on the other and not be honest. And that's what happens. They end up, almost killing each other.
Yeah. They both reacted so poorly. I mean, both, they just kept escalating it instead, and both had opportunities to de-escalate the situation and to step back and like, hold on. It's getting the accusations here are getting out of control. Let's just step back and tell me what's going on with you. Let me explain my situation. Like they had opportunities, but it's Kvothe's personality. He's a hothead. He is brash. He sometimes overreacts, and it's a character flaw. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, it's frustrating to read those type of things, but it's frustrating in the good way, where it's like you're frustrated with the character. You're not frustrated with Rothfuss's writing. You're frustrated with the character, and he's making choices that you don't like. But you need characters to make choices that you don't like for a story to be interesting. If they're always doing what you expect and what you want them to do, that's not interesting.
There's no tension.
Well, that would be good. No tension would be good, but
Well, this is how you get to where you're sweating and drinking Pepto-Bismol while you're reading the books.
Yeah.
Just freaking out.
Oh, man. That was like 7 bottles during that battle with Devi.
I like the it's interesting how they both, once it's over, once like they're on an even footing, they both are just kind of like, then they're just completely honest. And Debbie, it kind of reminds me of myself, where she's like, I was so angry with you. I don't know if I have ever been that angry with someone in my whole life, with anyone in my whole life like that. So she's just kind of like still feeling it now that it's gone. Unfortunately, I have that trait where I'll hang on to anger forever.
Yeah.
Like basically looking at someone and I'll always have this anger against them unless it is addressed. And I'll just hold on to that forever, basically.
Well, it also shows you that she had a lot of respect or trust or faith in Kvothe for it to even get to that point. Like she felt betrayed, and you're not going to feel betrayed unless you trust the other person to begin with. So it shows she'd felt like Kvothe was someone she could, trust, that he was a friend, not just a mark.
Mm. Well, and then it's also interesting where she and then she asks, "Are you really still getting after echoes from the plumb bob?" Which is interesting because it's sort of like it's almost an admittance that they're both using these different things within the complexity of their relationship, to where she's like, "Is that real, or were you just trying to?" It doesn't matter now, but it's interesting that they kind of have this business / personal relationship, and I think that speaks to the complexity of that.
Yeah, and it shows, she feels bad. I mean, she's not just vicious. She didn't just, sell it in no remorse. She obviously knew she was doing something that's wrong. And so I think that's important in the fact that it's not something where she's just like, so what? That's just what I do. There's nothing wrong with it. I got to do what I got to do. And da-da-da. Like she knows what she did is wrong. She feels it, that it's wrong. It's not just that Kvothe thinks what she did is wrong. She thinks what she did is wrong. But she's like, I really wanted them books. Those are some dope ass books.
Well, and then she did say, speaking of what we were talking about earlier, she says, normally I'd never make something like that, but unexpurgated copies are just impossible to find. So getting more specific towards what she has access to versus what she would be able to get with that access. So, but
he wrote that just purely so he could put that word in there.
Well, and then it does well. And she's kind of defending herself also, because Simmons basically saying like, "Yeah, you can't factor for shit," and she's just like, "I'm not proud of selling it." She's kind of, again, like you were saying, she does have an actual conscience, and it does bother her, especially that it was Ambrose. It seems.
Yeah, she's like, I'm not proud of selling it. She admitted, but then, she's got the great personality where she's like, then after a moment, she looked up again, grinning, but. Tegnoste has gorgeous illustrations.
Yeah, the book is dope.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the book. Oh, it's dope. It's so great.
Fucking thumps.
Thumps.
But yeah, so another aspect of that is we've talked about like the theory that Ari gave Kvothe the plumb bob. I just cannot imagine a scenario where Devi made it, gave it to Ambrose's men, and then he gave it to Ari to give to Kvothe. Like, it just seems so convoluted for that to be the path that it went. Like, why Ari? Why would Ambrose choose Ari of all people? Because it would make sense if he would choose Ari as Ari, like where Kvothe wouldn't expect Ari to do anything bad to him.
Yeah.
So she could secretly give it to him, and he wouldn't expect it. But to have Ari go out in public during the day, dressed up like a Modegan woman, putting on a show, and then going to Kvothe, and you're risking Kvothe seeing through her ruse. She's cracked. She's terrified of being around people. She could flip out, and it just blows up in his face. It seems a stupid roundabout way to give Kvothe the plumb bob if you're going to use Ari. It seems a real dumb way to do it. Seems like there would be smarter ways to use Ari, and if you were going to use Ari. It makes much more sense if he actually used a Modegan noblewoman than using Ari to pretend she's a Modegan noblewoman. Just doesn't make sense. Especially not with Debbie being involved.
It definitely feels like one of those theories that because of what's in the Slow Regard of Silent Things, you can make the connections. It doesn't improve the book, though. I mean, it gives further intrigue, and it gives more complexity to the relationships. Okay, fair enough, but all the reasons you just gave are the most damning towards it being Ari, and for Rothfuss to choose that. It would more be like, in a way, that what's in the Slow Regards of Silent Things is to basically throw off, or to maybe give people the reason to have the conjecture, and just kind of laugh about it to himself, where it's like, they're going to think this is, but it's not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Or he was trying to show that Ari's in tune with what's going on with Kvothe. And so all these things about the plumb bob, the reason those things are in her story is to show that she's in tune with Kvothe so much that when he's getting plumb bob, she's around things that are similar to what happened to him. She's around a burgundy dress when a girl in a burgundy dress gives Kvothe the plumb bob. She's around plums and nutmeg. She's, these things could be clues to how in tune she is to Kvothe, because that's how the story ends, is she's so in tune with him that she knows he's coming to visit, and she knows he's coming, a day before she initially thought. And like that, Kvothe in the chapter when he sees Ari, he point blanks like, Ari doesn't expect me. Not only does she expect him, she expects him, and she expects him to bring 3 gifts, and she would have no prior knowledge. So when you add in like the plumb bob stuff, it makes more sense if this is showing how in tune she is with Kvothe, because that's how the story ends, rather than it shows that she was part of a plot to fuck him over. It's so convoluted.
Okay, obviously she's not willingly causing him pain, because it seems like her role is to protect him.
Yeah.
So if she's doing it, and I know we did this, but it feels like it's worth mentioning. If she's doing it, then it's because Ambrose has something over on her, right? He has some control over her. She owes somebody something of that nature, which is why it would be so hurtful for her to then do it. I still don't believe she would do it.
This is like you have something over a Loden, and you use him as a critical pawn in your plan, and it's like, the dude is such a wild card.
Yeah.
Like, it just like, why would you use? Yeah, you don't want to use an unreliable, crazy person to be a central figure
crazy,
in your
crazy and
your
powerful.
plan. Yeah, and
Crazy,
same with
powerful,
Ari. Ari is
cunning.
also crazy and powerful
and cunning, and can find a way out of it, and can
Ari is clearly more powerful than Ambrose.
It's all right. So it's actually 100%. It's actually really interesting, however, to consider where I see that the theory is actually interesting is because it's so easy to
it's interesting in a respect of like it's unexpected. It would be it would be different. It would be turning the story in a direction you wouldn't necessarily expect on the surface, but it's because it would make things so convoluted where it's just like that's not tight. It's not like it's like the arrow catch. It's subtle and it's intricate, and like when you get it, it pays off big time. This would not pay off. This would like just be sending up red flags where you're like, hold on, wait a minute, like why would this happen? Like, and in order to put all those pieces back together, I just can't see like maybe Rothfuss could come up with a way that would like blow my doors off that I just don't expect. But barring that, I can't think of anything that if that was the case that I would be satisfied with the explanation.
What I was going to say though is why I find it interesting is that I think if you put the evidence against each other for it being Ari that drugged him versus not, I think it's overwhelming that it's not. But there is enough evidence that you can actually make a case. Like you can legitimately make a case. That's why I find it interesting. Because once you put them together, once you put them next to each other, I think it's very, very clear that Ari did not do it because it doesn't make the story better. I mean, you just apply the original rules of having a theory. Does it make it better? Does it make Rothfuss look like a hack versus an obviously extraordinarily talented writer?
Yeah, that's the important metric because he leaves so much up to implication where he's not explicitly telling you what's going on in every situation. So much of it is implied, and it points in so many different directions where you can just take an individual moment. You can say, well, it would make sense if it does this. It would also make sense if it means that. So it could make sense either way. But then when you step back and you're like, well, how does it fit into the entire structure of the story? Does it make the story better? Or does it make it worse? And this is one of those ones where unless he has an explanation that I just can't anticipate, it would make it worse because it would just, then I'm going to be like, nah, that's a massive hole. That's such a convoluted plan. Like it seems very tight if it is Ambrose goes to Devi gives him the thing. He's got something over a lady jail or a member of her court and who's a Modegan woman, and he gets her to do it. That all fits together, no holes, no reason to question it. That would all make perfect sense. Ari brings up huge red flags.
Well, and it's the nature of the story itself that it brings the reasoning simply based off of how much you can question and how many connections you can make. So there's this character that's an outlier. Just that in itself. Well, who is she? Who could she be? That in itself brings the theory. You know what I mean? It's begging for a theory.
Yeah.
Because but is it consistent with Ari's character? That's an ultimate question. Is it because you have to have these things be somewhat consistent. Now she is a wild card, so you could add that in. But okay, then is it elegant? Because his writing is elegant. The connections he makes make sense.
She's
so have these wild outliers.
She's so, like, when we're in her head, she's so concerned about doing the right thing.
Yeah.
To the point where putting an object on the wrong shelf, she's like, no,
it's unfathomable. Like she can't. It's not even unfathomable. It's like she can't physically allow it to happen. You know what I mean? Like, and she just continuously thinks about it. And she's like, I know that's not where it goes. Where does it go? Where does it go? You can tell. I mean, she's got like an OCD type thing going on, but to an extreme level because she knows where things go and how things fit. So this idea that she's just going to randomly do something that's unethical.
Yeah, and if she was like
cares about
drugging Kvothe, and then we're in her head for the next few days and she doesn't think about it once, like, no. We've been in her head. This is a person who would think about that.
Well, no. So what people then have to depend on is, well, she's cracked. So she's got this schizophrenic break or this psychotic break where she just doesn't access it. She just turns those things off. I was like, well,
we don't see her doing that in
That's what I
any
mean.
other situation. Yeah, that's why it just keeps getting more and more convoluted. Like you have to keep coming up with excuse after excuse after excuse. Like the other explanation, you don't have to come up with any excuses. Well, it all fits perfectly. So it's like if one fits perfectly and the other, you got to fucking bend over backwards, turn yourself into a pretzel to attempt, and it's still, even when you do that, it's not satisfying.
Well, that's what I also mean by. So it's another important part of a theory is that if it becomes more convoluted, if it's less elegant, that's why I use the word elegant, because his connections are. And if you're going to make something, you're forcing it. That's the thing. I mean, that's what a lot of times happens with these theories is you just ham-fist it into the thing that you want it to be. It's not working. You know, you have to depend on those little pieces of evidence that do allow the theory to exist. But eventually you got to, give up the ghost once you realize it's not working. So stop trying to force something that becomes more convoluted, makes Rothfuss look like less of a thoughtful writer. He's so careful with all these connections he makes. He's extraordinarily careful. Yeah. The idea that he just got sloppy with this one, why? It's very easy. I mean, I didn't write these stories, but it would be quite simple to change, relatively speaking, it would be quite easy to change this character, right? She wears something else. I mean, there's so many different ways that you could change that scene to make it a different individual that ends up poisoning him, or him getting it somewhere else. He gets it on the rooftop with Ari. They eat together. What are we talking about? I know Ambrose doesn't probably know that, but they eat together. She has a cup for him. She has the best chance of anybody to poison him.
Yeah.
Right? Other than like Anchor maybe, or probably still. So, yeah, I'm not buying it, bro. So no. I don't believe in your theory that you keep presenting.
Ari him. I recant that theory. But yeah, I also like the way it ends with he comes out in a robe and he's like, I won't impugn your honor by asking why you own a robe much longer and broader in the shoulder than anything a delicate young lady of your size could ever wear. Devi snorted indelicately and rolled her eyes. I like those little aspects of like you get pieces of, because obviously you're in Kvothe's head. So this is going to be the story of Kvothe. You're going to get his story. You're not going to get all the details of what Elodin is doing, when Kvothe's not around, or what Devi's doing when Kvothe's not around, or Denna, or any of these characters. You don't know what they're doing when Kvothe's not there, because this is Kvothe's story. He's telling it from his perspective, what he lived. So he's not with them. It's kind of like how you don't exist when I'm not around.
Yeah,
and
I'm just waiting.
I'm
just waiting for the next time we have one of these.
Exactly. And so
a buddy of mine, a guy that we both know, people that he worked with, like, they get intrigued because he just does his job and doesn't really talk about his hobbies and things. Like, they think he's really private. So like, dude, what do you do? Like, on the weekends, like, what are your hobbies? What do you do? And he goes, I just wait. They're like, what do you mean? I just, wait. I'm just waiting till, we come back. Wait until Monday.
Yeah.
Which I love that.
I just sit in a chair and I look at a wall.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you just picture like, no, I just sit there quietly for 2 days. And then I'm back and I'm just
can't turn my mind off. Like, what do you just like think about things? Like, no, I don't think about anything. I just can't turn off.
I literally just sit there and wait. It's funny.
But yeah, so you get like little pieces of their personalities, what they're doing, little hints. He just kind of implies, that Devi's got a social life outside of Kvothe. Like, she is a little bit of a playgirl. Like, she's not, he's not going around talking about Devi bringing in dudes or hanging out and partying, having fun and shit. But there's implications that is what she does. She does. She's she's not a hermit, or she's not a nun, and she's out there having her fun. It's just we're not getting that story.
Yeah, if Kvothe was a few years older and on his game, he would be having some fun with Devi. I mean, she flirts with him every single time they hang out. This is
they do. She flirts. They do like buddy reads with each other. I mean, they read a book and then they talk about the book that they both read. Like she
I
loans
guess
him
that's
books,
true.
and they read
Yeah,
them,
I
and
guess
then they
that's
talk
true,
about
but
them. So yeah, like
she,
he doesn't he doesn't completely ignore all the super fun that he could be having with Devi.
well, okay, yeah. I guess the fun I'm talking about is the
Yeah.
fact that she flirts with him every time they get together, and he's just he's a little boy with it, where he's just like change the subject.
Even this one with the I won't impugn your honor. I mean, she just snorts and rolls her eyes.
Yeah.
Fucking child. But yeah, and then another aspect, like he offers to pay the debt that he owes her, and she's like, "Let's just stick to our original deal." Like first, you're like, "Okay, yeah, so Devi's being cool," but realistically, Devi's a hustler, and she's hoping that Kvothe's gonna fucking blow all the money and not be able to pay his debt, and she's gonna be able to use that to get into the archives. That's her game. Is that she hopes that they borrow enough money that they can't pay it back so that she can force them to, do some kind of a deal.
It's a smart strategy, because if, things didn't work out the way he wanted them to, he went out and spent some money, right?
Yeah, I mean, and then Kvothe's like, all right, woo, got that burden off my back. It's like, no, you didn't. You still owe it. Like, now you're risking not being able to pay it. And then he's like, and I'm out there, I'm buying pants and socks and shoes, and getting some shirts, fucking
I love
paper.
the way it goes is great. It's he talks about there's a vast difference between having some coin and no coin. There's a feeling of helplessness that comes from having an empty purse. It's like seed grain. At the end of a long winter, if you have some grain left, you can use it for seed. You have control over your life. You can use that grain and make plans for the future, but if you have no grain for seed in the spring, you're helpless. No amount of hard work or good intention will make crops grow if you don't have the seed to start with. So I bought clothes.
Yeah,
So he just goes on to
seed. The only seeds he bought were loot strings. That's the only thing that helps him make money. None of the rest is buying seeds. He was buying corn. Seedless corn.
Yeah. Now, however, it's totally understandable, because he's always ripping up shirts, pants, woolen socks, hat, gloves, scarf. I mean, he did just almost freeze to death, it seems. But yeah, he splurges, sea salt, dried peas, peach preserves, warm slippers for Ari, all these things.
What would have been great is if
paper, some ink.
If after this, like, he goes up to a guy that's selling watermelon, and he's like, "You want the watermelon with the seeds?" Nah, you know what? Give me the seedless watermelon.
That would have been pretty perfect. But also above and beyond that, it'd be like, wow, this must have been, imported from far away. Like, watermelon's not in season, so he buys like the most expensive fruit possible. And it's like, well, I give you the seed, and then the seeded watermelon also is like, 3 jots cheaper or whatever.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, let's take it up a notch. Man.
Like,
why you could
use these seeds? You could like plant like a watermelon patch. Trust me, like the ground is just perfect for it. This is the right time to plant. I don't want the seeds. Give me the seedless.
So this is good, and you could have had a tinker. So there could have been a tinker, because he ignores the good advice of the tinker quite a few times. He's like, yeah, you should buy the watermelon and put it in the patch behind, and plant it with Ari, and put it in the little their little whatever.
Now, the tinker in this situation would have been like, you should go pay your debt, and then you know how much you can spend. Like that's what you should do. You should go back to her and pay your debt up front, and then you'll be okay.
That's what's so funny about it to me, is like he took the time to not only explain the difference of having money and not having money, but also an analogy or, a metaphor that, as old as the earth, and talks about it. And then, so I bought clothes, and he just goes right into, so I ignored all that. And
it's like, granted, these, it's not like he's being extravagant. He's just buying like the basic, his basic needs, but he could have got by without these things. Like, he'd been getting by without them. yeah, it's one of those ones where it's like, nah, I get it. Especially if you're
It's a
broke,
gamble.
having some clothes, it's kind of nice, but is it
Well,
really absolutely necessary? Would have paying Devi off been the smarter move? Probably.
Well, and again, the whole reason why I pointed out is, yeah, he's buying practical things, but he just made a whole big deal of talking about how having some money and no money is a big difference.
Or at least if
And
he
then
just
he's
spent,
like,
he made a point of like, so I took the money I owed Devi and I put that aside,
yeah,
and that's untouchable.
yeah.
But he
Instead,
just
he's
made it
talking about
seem
the
like
things he
he's
wants.
like fucking digging a hole.
Yeah. Well, and obviously it does work out because what comes up, but yeah, it's one of those funny things where Rothfuss always keeps us on that edge with Kvothe, where it's like there's always that. He's got some money, but he needs these things, and he's poor, and that weighs heavy, obviously, on somebody's mind when they don't have cash coming in.
Yeah, and then so the next chapter we got is chapter 43, Without Word or Warning. And in this chapter, Kvothe receives a note from Denna, who's off in Yill. Then he goes to Alodin's class where he learns Fela has gained a good bit of mastery over the name of stone, and Alodin has her make a stone ring for herself, signifying her skill, and he promotes her to Relar.
Yeah, that's good stuff. We get a lot of we get a lot here that we learn more about with the rings and stuff. That's super important, and we get more about the Adem. But anyway, so it's at the start of it, something that we've talked about before with Bellany Baron getting that address seems to be pretty big in terms of letting us know where we are
Yeah.
in the overall world, and stretching that back to the 7 cities, 8 cities, 7 cities.
Yeah, they destroyed 7 of the 8.
And then so Bellany Baron, that the idea is that's not the Twin Cities.
No,
It's
that's
just a different
Morella
name.
and Marilla.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, so obviously Bellany Baron makes it highly likely that the university this area is Bellin. The only other one it could be is Morella and Marilla, which would also make sense with Imre and the university kind of being on two sides of the river. But yeah, it's it's tough to know for certain on that.
I like the use of this guy that delivers the letter. He's like a credible, because we've had these really. I guess we had that one fat kid that was terrible, and really shitty at delivering a letter. We find out in this letter she sent another one that probably didn't make it, and she's expecting that it didn't. So I wonder who she gave that one to. But this guy seems to be legit, which is kind of, again, I like things like this because it builds out the world. You're getting.
But she gave that first letter to like just some street urchin. This is like a guy
This
that
is what this guy does.
It's like he's working on boats and stuff. He's traveling around doing shit. So like this is a like basically like a side job for him. Way he can make some extra money is by being a mailman on the side. Like when he gets into town, he can go and deliver mail to different people and make a little extra coin. So this is a grown man with a side job instead of like she found some bum kid who can't hardly put two thoughts together, obviously.
Well, it's cool too because we're I don't know if this is the first time we hear about Jumpui, but the fact that she's this far away, she's getting these places we haven't heard much about.
First time we hear about Jumpui is when he goes to the Broken Binding and exchanges the book to get to the university. Yeah. Well, yeah, the DD. The double D's.
Yeah. The fact that she's there, that she's out this far away, and that this guy's coming from that far away, and I like just the mixture of different people making these, deliveries, Pony Express type situation where it's like it just builds out the world in terms of your expectations of who these different cast of characters are that make up the world in itself.
And it obviously
about
shows again how much Devi cares for him. Is that she thinks to write him, like Kvothe doesn't think to write Sim or Will when he's in Severin. He doesn't write them at all. He doesn't write anybody. But he does. She does think. She does think to write to him, but she writes like 3 or 4 letters, maybe more. She writes like several letters. It's just he only gets one of them. But she writes more. Yeah. He dips out, so who knows? Like that, more could have came after he'd already left, or maybe when he was sitting in the fucking clink, letters were coming in that he never got. But she wrote him multiple letters, so obviously she's prioritizing letting him know what's going on in her life and keeping in contact with him. It's not free. It's not easy, and so she's going above and beyond to stay in contact with him.
Yeah, I like, and within the letter we learn a little bit about Ill, how it's all rolling hills, and then we learn about a little bit more. I mean, we know she has this problem with her lungs, but it seems like it's a lot more chronic than I had remembered, because she says that it seems I might pass an entire winter without being brought to bed by my lungs, my first in years. Where it's like, so like it's that bad, where she's literally like having to,
And it's obviously a warmer climate, which plays into.
Sounds nice.
We talked about she had that peach, and it was out of season, and so like she gets a peach from a place that's obviously warmer at that time of year, and then she's off to Yale. She's crying about this letter, eating a peach, and then she's off to Yale. Next thing we know, so I think that it's likely that letter, that peach came from Yale. That letter came from someone from Yale, and the circumstances is obviously, I think, of that letter is probably what drove her to Yale. It could be that she made a deal with her patron too, like, hey, get me to Yale, and he's like, if you go to Yale, I'll teach you, I'll get you to Yale, and I'll teach you about, the Yalish knots. You just got to start researching a song for me, or something like that. They could have made it. There could have been a quid pro quo involved in it, but I would be surprised if that peach, the letter, and her going to Yale, if those things aren't connected.
She mentions in the letter that she's learning all manner of sailors' knots. So that book I was talking about, that I read on occasion.
Yeah,
about sailors' knots.
She read it, Bubba Gumps or wherever the place you go to read about knots.
Yeah, and then she talks about she saw her first Adem mercenary. Again, it reiterates that they call them blood shirts, and talks about how not very big. The Adem mercenary being a woman, not like physically intimidating, but endlessly twitching. I like just those. Again, the way he does this with the Adem too. He talking about them twitching, how they dress different. How they talk about them fighting. Like, we've heard about them being extremely adept at fighting, like extraordinarily impressive. Here, she just says, "I've not seen her fight, and I'm not sure I wish to, though I am curious." So there's a lot of cool shit in this letter.
Yeah, and she uses, when she's talking about, though I'm curious, I'm still enamored of the harp, and currently housing with a skilled gentleman, whom I shall not name. So I think there's probably something there too. I obviously can't figure it out from just that, but the fact she doesn't name him and she points out she won't name him, there's probably something to do with that. And then she's like, for the furtherance of my study in this, and she's like, I've drunk some wine while writing this letter. I mention this to excuse my above spelling of the word furtherance, kissed. And so the kissed, I'm curious if that has anything to do with her background, because after this, she starts using Sealdish curse words moving forward. She said at least a couple, 2 or 3 times. This is one of them. But she uses...
my cussing has been greatly broadened.
Yeah. So
and the guy that brought the letter said kissed.
Yeah. So I'm thinking it's more likely, because I don't think she's got any kind of heritage to the Sealdish, but what I think this is showing is that it's an example of that she's kind of a chameleon. When she goes around people, she learns to act in a way that is similar to them. We see it most obviously when she is with the Kvothe and Traben with the, that bumpkin Shem, the pig herd.
Yeah.
She drops into that role immediately without any trouble. And we see it when, she's hanging out with the different nobility, when she's got to act like she's, above Kvothe and she's too important for him and she's got to act all haughty. She plays these roles. And so, when she's hanging out with some sailors, she starts cursing like the sailors and that kind of stuff. So she's kind of a chameleon, and it's showing that, I think, is mostly what it's showing.
Well, and also like Kvothe, he's an actor. She's an actress.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, the similarities where they both are able to put on, step into a role to get where they need to be and to do what they need to get across the impression they need to get across. Yeah,
it's like Kvothe studying that guy that was watching the door for Denna, and he had that, he gave him that, that smile or whatever, and Kvothe's like, man, I gotta memorize that look, and then he uses it later on.
Well, I was gonna say, remember when he got out of Tarbine? That's maybe one of our best examples. But he uses it all the time. I mean, he uses it every time he talks to Debbie, basically, or every time he's trying to get information from somebody. He's watching their body language, but it happens with Debbie quite a bit.
But I think these are important clues for Denna, because obviously, if you just look at what Kvothe is telling you, just outwardly, what he's explaining, you would know nothing about Debbie. You have to look at the things she says, her actions, her surroundings. You have to look around Denna to try to figure out what the fuck's going on with Denna, because Kvothe is not thinking about it. So if you're only looking at Denna through what Kvothe thinks about Denna, you're not going to have a very good picture of her. But if you take a step back and you look at the things Kvothe's not talking, like Kvothe doesn't think about, why did she go to Yale? What's up with the peach? What's up with the letter? What's up with the Yalish knots? Like, I mean, the written magic, why she's learning secret magics. Like she wants to stick with a patron that is beating her. Even when Kvothe is offering her better options, she turns him down. She wants to stick with this guy. So he's not thinking about why. He's not asking those questions. Like, what is really going on? What is she's got an agenda, and he's not even realizing that she's got an agenda. But if you don't look at it through Kvothe's eyes, and you just look at it as a reader, and you look at all the subtle hints, there's something more going on. And she's much more dynamic than Kvothe is giving her credit.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, he complains about how difficult it is to find her, but he doesn't really question why she is where she is.
Yeah.
He doesn't go there.
He's very surface level with her. He's got a very surface level, because
very interesting, man. Because he's more interested in her than anyone else other than the Chandrian. Right? He's more interested in her than anybody in the world.
But if you look at Denna too, she seems to have a surface level understanding of Kvothe, and nobody else is figuring out that Kvothe is hunting down the Chandrian, that his family were massacred. No one's like putting pieces together, because he doesn't explain it. So you'd have to like really focus in on Kvothe and like trying to piece all the clues together. And if you're not doing that, Kvothe's not gonna make a lot of sense. You're not gonna understand why he does what he does. He's just gonna seem a little kind of fucking scatterbrained. And Denna's the same way. If you're not like putting all the pieces together and really thinking about it, she doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, think about that in the sense that she's in Traben at this wedding, basically being looked at like she may have been part of a mass murder, and Kvothe shows up. He showed up to save me. Why did he really show up? You know, like, what was he really doing here?
Yeah. And you know,
from her perspective,
obviously. You know, she's thinking that. And then, but she's not really, like, she's hearing like these stories about Kvothe calling the name of the wind. Oh, I heard he called a demon wind. But she's not really like buying it. And so she's just thinking there's stories about him. He's a kind of a mystery, an enigma. And she's that to him, but Kvothe should be like going like, okay, what the fuck is she doing in Severin? And not only that, if her patron is from Severin, what was he doing in Amyr? You know, I mean, why was he hanging out? Why did he take her to Traben if he's from Severin? What is the connections here? He's not trying to piece all these things together. He's not trying to figure out what is going on with Denna, because he doesn't even think that there is something going on with Denna. He just sees her as someone living, you know, her life, and he's not interested in, you know, what's going on behind the scenes if it doesn't apply to him and what he's trying to do.
Yeah, their relationship is interesting. That's for sure.
Yeah, they're both very much focused in on themselves, and they're not trying to really understand the other person.
They're both alone in their own minds, right?
I shouldn't say that. Kvothe is trying to understand her, but he's only trying to understand her in the context of a relationship. He's not trying to understand her as an entire person. Like, what motivates her? Why is she, you know, why does she need this patron? Why is, you know, he's not trying to puzzle out her entirety. He's like trying to puzzle out what she's looking for in a man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it keeps us, we're constantly like wanting to be fed more, right? About the two of them, and in terms of how they relate to one another, what they know about each other, and then like in the context of how curious they are about the other person. It's interesting because the way they play off of each other is they both know that the other doesn't want to share too much. So they kind of both take a step back in that way. Then Kvothe's extra careful because he doesn't want to be like all those other guys he's seen.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a lot of eggshells, you know.
Yeah, it's one of the more interesting relationships in a book, because it's not what you would expect. It's not what you normally get. It doesn't seem to be like that. They're destined for a happy ending. Seems pretty tragic, and it seems like that they're constantly missing each other's signals, and even if they do get on the same page, it's not going to be for long. It's not going to last.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it definitely seems like it's going to continue in the direction it's been going. And as close as they can get to each other, it sort of feels like what we've gotten thus far is probably about what it's going to be. You know, they've had good moments together, and they've spent great portions of their lives together. And maybe they
I hope they at least get
more intimate moments.
Practice on their harp fingering a little bit.
Yeah, and jazzy
just like a
hands
couple of moments like that. Yeah,
the things Kvothe
practice like the Florian's jazz hand.
Yeah,
thunder thrust move, and
it'll be funny if her reaction is like, all right, can you want to stop that and stop with all the hand stuff? If she's like literally like Vespa or whoever the fuck.
What was this deal with the hands?
Yeah, can we just get to business
stop
here?
Waving your hands at me, you fucking weirdo.
What are you doing?
This is Thousand Hands. You're just like waving your hands at me. This is not. I'm not getting anything out of this. The fairies love it. I'm telling you, fairies are huge into this. It's a huge move with fairies.
I'm not a fairy, bro.
Yeah.
Cut it out. Cut out all the foreplay bullshit.
But yeah, then we go from Denna's letter to a great Elodin chapter and a real slap in Kvothe's face as far as his ego's concerned.
I like the beginning with it, because I don't remember every minute detail. So Elodin showing up on time, which surprised the shit out of everybody. Now everybody's like unprepared because they're prepared for him to be late. But then he's like dressed up. He had a haircut. Like he's got his shit together. And he
like it shows you, because it's made pretty clear that the only shit that Elodin gives a fuck about is this naming, learning magical powers. That's what he thinks is important. He thinks all this other stuff is pointless, waste of time, it's frivolous, it's unnecessary. He's like, let's just get down to business. And business. And he goes to, for him, pretty extensive lengths to make a big deal out of it, and to celebrate it for Fela. And Fela's impressive, dude. Yeah, he gives he gives an uncharacteristic speech where he's like, in this ancient university, there was no skill more sought after than naming. All else was base metal. Namers walked these streets like tiny gods. They did terrible, wonderful things, and all others envied them. Only through skill in naming did students move through the ranks. An alchemist without any skill in naming was regarded as a sad thing, no more respected than a cook. Sympathy was invented here, but a sympathist without any naming might as well be a carriage driver. An artificer with no names behind his work was little more than a cobbler or a smith. They all came to learn the names of things, Elodin said, his dark eyes intense, his voice resonant and stirring. But naming cannot be taught by rule or rote. Teaching someone to be a namer is like teaching someone to fall in love. It's hopeless. It cannot be done. Master Namer smiled a bit then, for the first time looking like his familiar self. Still, students tried to learn, and teachers tried to teach, and sometimes they succeeded. And then he has Fela come up there, and he tells them, you've all chosen a name you hope to learn, Elodin said, his eyes sweeping over us, and you have all pursued your studies with varying degrees of dedication and success. And Kvothe obviously kind of slinks into his seat at that, knowing like he's not giving this class his full attention and effort. He's constantly just thought it was ridiculous. But he's like, where you have failed, Fela has succeeded. She's found the name of stone. He turned a sideways look at her. How many times? 8 times, she said, looking down, her hands twisting nervously in front of her. And he's like, when naming was still taught, we namers wore our prowess proudly. A student who gained mastery over a name would wear a ring as a declaration of their skill. Elodin stretched out a hand in front of Fela and opened it, revealing a river stone, smooth and dark. And this is what Fela will do now as proof of her ability. And then,
pretty cool.
Yeah.
I remember personally, I was surprised that Fela knew the name of stone. First of all, it's all surprising to me. I didn't know you could know the name of stone, or at least I hadn't.
He says in the very first class, like, Fela, some part of Fela understands the name of stone, and he mentions that a few of them have either called or have some inkling of a name. Like Fela's was stone.
But I guess I was surprised by the fact that she had this much of a mastery over it, and it kind of comes out of the blue because we haven't thought about it, and because we don't hear about anyone else obtaining the names of things,
Now, when you go back through it, when you go back through it, you see why. Like she would have done it where the others didn't. And she's listening to him. She talks about before this class ever started. She's like, Elodin's, in exchange for stuff I make him at the fishery, he's doing something of a semblance of teaching me. And she's like, he's having me do crazy things. Like she mentioned some of the crazy things that he was having her do, but she's doing them.
Yeah.
She's not questioning everything. Like when class is going on and he's like, give me an interesting thing, she gives him an interesting thing. And, they're every example of the class, she's performing, trying to do what he's asking her to do. She's not trying to understand the method, the reason for the madness. She's just going along with it. She doesn't understand it. She doesn't get it. She thinks it's crazy, but she's doing it. And Kvothe is not like that at all.
Yeah, her ego's not getting in the way. Kvothe's ego is getting in the way, for sure.
No, I did think one thing Fela could probably use it as improvement is like she hadn't told anybody about her success in naming when they're, griping about the class. She never told anybody. I really think one thing you have to do when you're a humble person like that is you have to let people know how humble you are. Otherwise, they're going to be surprised by your humbleness. Like in a moment like this, they're all surprised because she hasn't told them already that she's very humble. And so I think she's making a mistake by not explaining how humble she is and that she's more humble than them.
Where I thought you were going with that is that if she was telling the class, hey, this shit's actually working, you might want to, pay attention and apply yourself. That could have helped Kvothe. That could have helped others. So I thought that's where you're going, but instead you wanted to talk about your humility badge again.
No, I was talking about Fela's humility. But if you bring up mine, I am very humble. But
I do.
Obviously, like, but I think that it fits with Fela's personality. She's not one to talk about herself.
Yeah,
she doesn't.
She actually lacks. She seems to not want as much attention because she's getting it anyway. There's no way around it. She's the hottest chick at the school. So
and she ended up with Sim. So clearly she's got self-esteem problems.
I do like how it's very realistic how she's nervous. She admits she kind of has some control over this. I mean, Kvothe hasn't. By the end of the books, by the end of book 2, Kvothe has some mastery and control, but I don't think he didn't call the name. He didn't call the name of the wind 8 times.
The last conversation he has with Master Lorren. Master Lorren, it's like, all right, so I called the name of wind again, and this is like the 5th time or something that he's done it, 5th or 6th time, whatever. But he's like, yeah, pretty soon you'll be able to make a ring of air, and Kvothe's like, what makes you think I haven't already? And Lorren's like, ha ha ha. And Kvothe doesn't smile or anything, doesn't give. So it leaves the reader questioning, is like, did he? Because he doesn't say yes or no. He doesn't be like, I was fucking with Lorren. He just explains that Lorren was unsure. He's like, no, wait, really? Did you? No. It's one of those kind of moments. So
that's pretty
leaves
great.
it up in the air where, he's at least there. It seems like at the end of book 2, he's where Fela's at right now. He's at least, on the cusp of it.
I like that she's like nervous, like, well, shit, man, she's not ready for this. And he's reassuring, Lorren's reassuring her. I like the visual images of, what she's doing. The fact that she's like holding it to where she's holding the rock that he gave her out in front of her, the little river stone. And she's holding it right in front of her eyes, closes her eyes and like takes a breath. And then, so the first thing she sees when she opens her eyes is the stone.
Yeah.
And then she's just focusing on it. And I swear, dude, Lorren and Puppet need to become friends and hang out. They'd have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I bet they do. I bet they are friends.
Dude, it's so similar. Like what he's saying is what we just heard from Puppet.
Yeah.
Don't look at it. You're looking at it. Don't look at it. Look at it. It's great, man.
Yeah.
And then he smacks her on the back of the head, which is great. I love that's so great because Fela in that moment, like anybody else, is like, what the fuck? Like looks at him like, dude, what the fuck's your problem? Like she gets pissed.
Yeah, and
in the fucking head.
You get that that's what he wanted. He wasn't like smacking her as a penalty. It was to stir that emotion up in her because he knew once she snapped out of it and stopped thinking about the moment and stopped overthinking. He smacked her and then she got angry and he's like, now look.
Yeah, it's a weird.
She sees it.
It's an interesting. What Rothfuss is doing there is really interesting, which he does with Kvothe as well. It's like you get this heightened emotional state, but stop trying so hard. Like loosen the grip mentally, but still be in this heightened state of like awareness or focus.
If you think about it in terms of like when you lose your temper, like your emotions are running the show at that point. You're not, your rational mind is gone. So like that is, you know, when he smacks her on the head, that is eliminating her rational analytical mind, and then her emotions are heightened. And so when you're thinking about a sleeping mind, it makes sense that an emotional state would be a trigger for the sleeping mind to kind of take over and control things. Because like, you do feel like when you lose your shit, you're like, man, I lost it. I lost control. You feel like it's like like you can't control yourself. You've lost control of your body.
No, it's literally, my head literally gets hot. I get like, you can feel it through your entire body. And yeah, you do literally lose control. And even in the moment, you're like, I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't do that. And do it anyway.
Yeah.
And just lose your shit, start throwing stuff, and just act like a complete idiot. It's the type of thing, if you could step outside yourself, you'd be like, nah, man, none of that is helping.
Yeah.
Not a single part of that is helping. But inside of your own state, it's just like, I know, but everything inside me physically, it's like your sleeping mind. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's
your
like
sleeping
your
mind
central,
takes control, man. Starts running the show, and it's not. Sometimes it's not the best driver.
It's like your central nervous system sort of takes over and goes into hyperdrive, and then your rational brain doesn't know what to do, and it's literally just emotion running it.
Goes and hides in a corner and starts crying.
Well, it's like that connected. It's like there's a connection between your central nervous system and your emotional, psychological state, or not psychological, just emotional state. And then you just fucking, but I mean, it's in our DNA.
You gotta coax your rational mind back out. Like, I'm sorry, buddy. Come on, back out. It's okay. We settled down. We're all right now. Sorry for yelling. I'm sorry I scared you, little buddy. But I need you to come out here and take the wheel. Drive me home. Been drinking too much.
Well, I mean, I've literally said those things to my kids, where it's like, not take the wheel, but yeah, sorry, I lost my temper there. That was stupid. I'm sorry, or it's just, just lose your shit. Getting better at it. You eventually get the control. I'm trying to be, I need more puppets and Elodins in my life to help me see the way and stop.
I used to have a really, really bad temper, but not so much anymore. I got control over it after a while.
If you have kids, it kind of brings it out.
I got control over it when, like, I lost my shit over a sports game. One of my friends was like, it's like, man, that was one of the only times I've been literally scared of you in my entire life. He was like, it was scary being around you. And I was like, all right, I got to get my temper under control. I can't be scaring my friends.
This is a little much.
Yeah,
especially, and over, I mean, I get it. I care. There are teams I give a shit about.
Yeah.
And those sporting events you give a shit about. But yeah, if you're literally scaring people as a result of something you had no actual part in, that's a little much.
Yeah,
that's
like,
a lot.
All right, I got to get control of my temper. But that's a young, you're still in your, early 20s with fucking testosterone flowing through your fucking body in overdrive. So yeah, it's harder to control it back then.
I love the idea also of what happens to the ring. I mean, I guess in itself, this is a pretty paltry way of applying it, but it sounds like she could, be a jeweler and just make some badass rings out of stones and sell them shits.
Yeah, it sounded dope. I mean, and I like the aspect of it, like the parts that went away were like turned into sand.
Yeah,
similar to when Elodin tore down that wall, and he just turned the whole wall into sand.
Yeah.
So like the parts she didn't need, she just turned into sand. So same type of thing. Call back to that.
Yeah.
And then we also get the other piece of information. I hereby promote you to the rank of Rular. He held up the ring, your hand. Almost shyly, Fela held out her hand, but Elodin shook his head. Left hand, he said firmly. The right hand means something else entirely. None of you are anywhere near ready for that. Reason that's important and noteworthy is earlier in this book when he's talking to Aaron and he's trying to convince Aaron to not join the king's army, and he's like, I'm Kvothe and I'll tell you all my stories, and he's like, hey, where's your rings? And then he tells the little poem about Kvothe's rings. Kvothe in that poem has rings on both hands. So the fact that
Yeah,
Elodin's like, no one's even anywhere near ready for that, and it sounds like Kvothe, has rings on both his hands by the end of his story.
yeah, it sounds like he becomes full on arcanist times 10. Like he becomes Billy Badass, or he's an imposter and he's wearing a bunch of wood rings and people hate him.
Yeah, it seems like he's gonna get to Elodin's level or surpass it. Because it seems like, we've seen Elodin in action, and Elodin is got some fucking major power.
Yeah,
he turned a wall to sand.
yeah. Well, but his voice too. I wonder. Well, okay, so I know we've talked about that, but yeah, Kvothe with his music seems to have that sort of an effect, like Elodin's voice, where it takes over the entire room. You feel it in your chest, basically. Like you feel it in like taking over you to a degree. It's kind of creeps people out. Kvothe does that. With his music. He takes over which is such a great choice by Rothfuss, because we can buy in pretty early on, because people that enjoy music, it does kind of take over you. But obviously, it seems like there's a lot more in terms of Kvothe's ability within his music, because he's putting people in a literal, it seems like a literal trance.
Yeah.
So, like what he does to Denna when he first plays for her, she runs off crying. She runs out of there.
And if you think about like how the masters obviously tried to design a room that Elodin couldn't escape from, and they were incapable of doing that. And now they went from trying to lock him into a room to just accepting him as one of the other masters. Like, they don't have a choice in the matter. It's like, it's not like it doesn't seem like they could tell him no. Like, to the point where, like, at one point, I think Name of the Wind, he's like, all 8 of us are here. And he's like, oh, wait, all 9 of us are here.
Yeah. No, it's that was a really interesting thing to consider, because you just kind of buy in once you read through the first 2 books. You just kind of buy in, oh yeah, he's a master. But as you think more about it, and like that detail where it's like, oh, they forget, and the fact that he was locked up, it's kind of like he's so powerful that as long as he has control of his mind, there ain't shit they can do about it. But that does also bring up the interesting aspect of, oh, they did something different here, and there's the copper in there.
Yeah.
So that brings up the whole thing with copper, where it's like,
they couldn't. It also brings up the fact that they couldn't keep him in before, and they're trying to figure out a way, where they could. And it could just be that just in case he loses his fucking shit again, or in case someone else powerful needs to be locked up, we got to have a way to keep someone in. So it could be just a just in case thing, or they're trying to figure out a way to fucking lock this dude up. But he's just too fucking powerful. But they treat him in a way like, hey, he's the one that, claims to be Master Namer. It doesn't seem like this is it's not like, because he's not even like teaching a class. This is the first class he's teaching in who knows how long. So he's Master Namer, that before, when Kvothe gets there, he's Master Namer who's not teaching shit. He's not teaching anyone anything. So it's like,
seems like,
what is it? How is this dude a master?
Obsessed. It seems like he was obsessed with that door. But yeah, so kind of where my mind goes with that is, why not have a complete cell of copper, where the cell is copper?
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying, like thick walled copper. And will Kvothe end up getting, conquering copper, and he breaks out of this copper cell?
How rare is copper though? And copper's not. You could.
It's malleable.
It's not steel.
Super malleable.
Yeah, it's not steel. Yeah. So, you'd think someone could just start kicking the shit out of a wall and eventually fucking break it down.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously there's going to be more to it. He's not just putting it in there for shits and giggles. There's going to be more to it.
And obviously the door is all copper, and he couldn't kick that down. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's tough to say, but clearly I think it's significant that they tried to lock him up and they couldn't. So, dude's super powerful. And so when he's talking about like rings on both hands, he's not like nobody's capable of that. I bet you he's capable of it, but we do have pretty good indication that Kvothe eventually gets to this level.
So that's an interesting thing, though, as well with the rings, because when Kvothe asks Elk Sadal how many names he knows for things, he's like, well, that's kind of a personal question, and it insinuates, and he may even come out as far as
he says
explicitly saying, no, but I mean, he says like why that's sort of a rude question to ask, is if now you kind of know a lot about me, you kind of know how to come at me. It seems to be what's kind of insinuated.
That's what he was. He explicitly is like, if you know someone's strengths, you know their weaknesses, and
so the rings would be pretty bold.
Yeah,
right.
That's what I was going to say. It's like, the guys in the past obviously had a little bit of a little cocky swagger to them. Like they were coming in, fucking swinging their double dongs around.
Well, so consider they don't say anything about Loden wearing rings, right?
No, he's not. It seems like it's custom that's disappeared.
Interesting. So I wonder. Yeah, I wonder if he'll if the suggestion from a Loden to Fela would then after the fact be like, yeah, you might not want to wear that.
Yeah.
Or you will for a while. I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting.
But that is all I got on that chapter.
Yeah, me too.
All right, so chapter 44 is titled The Catch. And in this chapter, Kvothe goes into Kilvin's office and tells him he's ready to show him his project. And the project's an arrow catch, which will stop any arrows that come near it. Something to protect travelers on the road. Kilvin loves it, although not the parts of how he came about making it. And he ends up personally buying the one from Kvothe that he made. Gives him a large sum of money for it.
Yeah, it's awesome. And again, of course, because it's Kvothe, I think the way, and we'll get to it, but the way Kilvin puts it is, before, with his thief's lantern, I think he calls it, you made something
bad in a good way.
Bad in a good way. This time you made something good in a bad way.
Yeah.
But all in all, it's pretty great. But it's great. I mean, I love the Kilvin chapters. I really like the way Rothfuss structured the character. He's really interesting, and he's perfect for what his use is. In his role in the story. I remember again finding it a bit surprising as he's like, all these distractions. I finished my project. Like, oh, nice. And so I remember it's a very intriguing way to start the chapter. You get kind of excited about it. I was thinking though, when he comes in and it says that Kilvin is hunched over, I was thinking downward dog.
Yeah, more than likely.
You think? Yeah.
More than likely. That's the logical explanation, that he was in the middle of a yoga routine, which shows you like how much he was ready to see Kvothe's, project, is that he would break up a yoga routine, which this guy is all about. Like that's seems to be his number one priority is yoga. Clearly that's established in the book, and he's willing to put that aside to go see Kvothe's project.
Well,
so
and
that says something.
I think what it also says is just how dedicated he is to the yoga, because the master artificer was hunched over his personal work table, carefully removing the screws from the bronze casing of a compression pump. So he's still working. Yeah. While he does his poses. It's pretty great, dude. Yeah. He doesn't even look up. He's like, yes, Raylar Kvothe. So he's locked in, dude. He's
really, though, with yoga, I mean, that's the best time to do yoga is when you're doing other projects.
I love the idea of picturing this dude like building things while he's doing yoga poses. It's that's how locked in he is.
It's like doing splits while he's like blowing glass. He's just bouncing up and down, in and out of splits, like bouncing back and forth, switching legs and switching switching splits from backward, sideways to front and back as he's like blowing glass tubes and making his lamps.
Yeah, it's interesting Rothfuss chose to not mention those things, but
Yeah,
they're there.
it's one of those things where, like we talked about, he implies so much, but he doesn't explicitly tell you these things. These are the hidden clues that, most people miss unless they listen to like a podcast like ours where we spell everything out for you and make it all crystal clear what's actually going on.
He does, and he does increase the stakes here by mentioning the admissions would be coming up soon. Tuition's going to be due. We know he already spent some money, so he doesn't have nearly as much as he did. He still owes Devi. He doesn't remind us that, but we know that. So now it's basically like, I'm out of time.
Yeah.
So he's run some tests, but he needs Kilvin to approve this so he can, start making some money with it, is the idea.
Yeah, he wishes he had more time, but he needs he's got to get this done now. And it's such a great culmination from Kilvin telling him he's got to make something, both hinting at he's working on something, he's got a room, and then we finally get here, and it's, we haven't heard what he's been doing. We haven't heard the buildup, and it's great culmination. And
yeah, it's cool too, because you got like this big room, right? And then he's just got thick bales of straw stacked against a wall, and then something hanging in the ceiling where he made a scarecrow, and you're just kind of like, what the fuck? Like,
yeah, he's got this scarecrow. It's dressed in my burned shirt and a pair of sackcloth pants. Part of me wish I'd run a few more tests and time it had taken to sew the pants and stuff the straw man, but at the end of the day, I'm a trooper first and all else second. As such, I couldn't I couldn't ignore the chance to show a little showmanship. And then I like the fact, he gives Kilvin the crossbow, and Kilvin's first instinct is, like, man, don't tell me you did some thing to make a crossbow, like after
the lantern.
Yeah.
Now
like, don't tell me you're making
weapon?
a better crossbow. It's like, you just wasted your time. Like, then he's like, no, just trust me. But I like the fact that like Kilvin is just like turning this thing over and analyzing every little aspect of it. He gets the arrow and he's looking at it. He's kind of perplexed because he's like, man, there's nothing. This is just a crossbow and an arrow. There's nothing to this. Like, so he's a little baffled. He doesn't understand what's going on yet.
This is one of those scenes that I think would actually be pretty great for a television series. We talked about that sort of in the past, certain scenes. If it gets built up the right way, obviously with the books, it gets built up a certain way, but the idea that he walks in this room, this is what we see, he hands it, you're sort of like, dude, did he fucking do this? Like, and what's so great for us is actually what would be great in terms of the show, and actually we don't know what he made either, so we know he hands him the crossbow, and it's kind of like, dude, your judgment's fucked, man. Yeah. And we already know his judgment can be flawed in certain aspects, and here it's playing on that, where you're just kind of like, dude, what the fuck, man? Did you really? And so we're in Kilvin's position, right? So Rothfuss did a tremendous job with that, that's for sure.
Yeah, this would be a good montage, 80s montage scene, like you could do, like Kvothe making, working in the room, like putting the montage is him making like the straw scarecrow, and he's just like, he fails every scarecrow. He's not satisfied with it, and he's just throwing it to the side and getting pissed, like going and drawing sketches of scarecrows. So like the whole time you're thinking like this dude is just making a scarecrow, like that's his big focus. And
yeah, he's got pencil behind the ear, and he's really going at it, and he's got all these drafts, blueprints and everything. He's making the perfect scarecrow,
playing that song from I think it's from the America Fuck Yeah movie, Team America, where it's like montage
doing stuff but not showing all of it. That's insinuating. I wish I knew all the lyrics.
It's a classic. But
absolutely,
that would have been a perfect time, and just all focused on the scarecrow, which ends up being like just a showmanship aspect of it. But yeah, so then he get and then you get the aspect of like he just takes this crossbow and like cocks it back and puts the arrow in, and Kvothe's like, my God, how strong is this dude? He's like just like pulling that back. I was like, blisters on my hands doing this shit, and he just does it with ease, like it was nothing.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, and we also have
all those yoga
Kvothe.
classes, man.
Yeah. Well, we also have Kvothe, hands are sweating, stomach full of doves. Tests were fine and good. Tests were important. Tests were like rehearsal. But all that really matters is what happens when the audience is watching. This is a truth all troopers know. And it keeps drawing on that history that he has. And he's a performer and all, but this is like legitimate nerves because, yeah, he's tried it out, but we'll see if this thing works. And we still don't even know what it is. And, but yeah, Kilvin's he builds that strength. He's got that core strength, Yeah. Yoga gives him that core strength.
And I like this part where it's like, I was surprised to see him calmly draw a half breath and exhale slowly as he pulled the trigger. The crossbow jerked, the string twanged, the bolt blurred. There was a harsh metallic clank, and the bolt stopped midair as if it had struck an invisible wall. Clattered to the stone floor in the middle of the room, 15 feet away from the straw man. Unable to help myself, I laughed and threw my arms triumphantly into the air. Kilvin raised an eyebrow and looked at me. I grinned a manic grin. The master retrieved the bolt from the floor and examined it again. Then he recocked the crossbow, sighted, and pulled the trigger. Clank. The bolt dropped to the floor a second time, skittering slightly to one side. And then Kilvin spots where the source of the noise. He sees that there's this device hanging in the corner of the room that it looks like a lantern, an 8-sided lantern that's kind of spinning around.
It's so great, man, because what happens, we're like, oh shit, well, that could be great. And then once we learn of the device, it's like, okay. So we obviously, when we learn of sympathy, you could go crazy with all the things that you would be capable of doing with sympathy. But Rothfuss did something really interesting here with Kvothe's device. But I did want to mention and point out what I just pointed out a minute ago also, is that when he laughs and throws his arms triumphantly up into the air again, not exactly Dame Lillard, this would be a good Curb Your Enthusiasm moment. I'm like, all right, settle down, bro.
Hey,
act like you've been there.
Sometimes, man, you gotta go and fucking swing on a pole, get your standing ovation.
Woo!
But
I did it.
Yeah. And I like, what is this thing, Relar Kvothe? And he's like, in general terms, Master Kilvin, it's an automatically triggered kinetic opposition device. I beam proudly. More specifically, it stops arrows. What do you call it? Having trouble with the name, but for now I'm calling it an arrow catch. Kilvin grunted. Doesn't catch the arrow precisely. I know, I said, exasperated, but it was either that or call it a clank. Kilvin looked at me sideways, his eyes smiling a little. One would think a student of Elodin's would prove more facile with his naming, Relar Kvothe. Delavari had it easy, Master Kilvin. He made a better axle and stuck his name on it. I can't very well call this the Kvothe. Kilvin chuckled. True. He turned back to the arrow catch, eyeing it curiously. How does it work? And
by the way,
starts giving him the explanations.
So Kilvin looks at him, smiles a little, then he giggles a little. Don't you think there should be some soft saxophone playing in the background in this scene?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cue that up again.
Yeah, you got to really make this like an 80s, early 90s thing.
Well,
I put on some episodes of the first season of Lois and Clark. It's early 90s, and there is so much saxophone jazz music going on, like in moments where it's just like, this is the cheat. It makes it so cheesy. Yeah. Like, who thought
it's really funny.
Saxophone, and like anytime there's kind of like a romantic type of situation, they start playing a saxophone, and it's like, what are you guys? Who thought this was a good idea?
It's really funny how that. I don't know. It's funny because that's our youth basically, but it dates every single movie, television show, all of them. It's like that patented sound where you're just like, oh shit.
You hear it and you're like, oh, so we're in the Kenny G era.
Yeah,
And Kenny
exactly.
G was very popular.
The moment it happens, you're like, oh, Lethal Weapon 1. Okay. All right.
It's like,
Here we are again.
This is the era when like you guys took jazz music and you made it really bad.
Yeah. You made it horrible and then made everything that has this sound seem saccharine as shit. And
it's immediately cheeseball. Any scene with it just from the 80s, it's just immediate cheeseball scene.
I do really, I love a couple ways that this is worded. Like, I feel like, I mean, Kilvin's very to the point, but like, what is this thing? Like him asking that seems, I don't know, almost out of character, or I guess revealing in a way that he's perplexed and pressed. And then I like I could call it this or this. And then, the way that he uses great wording to describe why those descriptions don't work. And how they sort of work that out. And then, as he describes how it actually works, that's what I was talking about earlier. It's so great about Rothfuss giving us an application of sympathy in a way that would just have amazing utility for people in this world, a real practical purpose.
Yeah. Well, and I just like the concept of it and the design of it and the explanation of the design of it. It's just it's such a brilliant chapter. Like, the arrow comes in and he's like, at 20 feet, it triggers something that, shoots the arrow, knocks the arrow down. And he's like, but, my first attempt at this, he's like, it didn't work. And Kilvin's like, yeah, that's been tried before. And he's like, yeah, I should have thought of that. And then he's like, then I thought of the bear trap. And then he brings in the bear trap. And so I need something that would come back at the arrow and with more force than the arrows coming in. And so a bear trap modified is able to do that, is able to knock the arrow back and eliminate its momentum. And so we get that explanation of what the bear trap was for. Because before he mentions it, it's probably lost from most people's mind the first time. They're probably not even thinking about the bear trap. And then when he brings it up, it's like, oh, yeah, that's what it was for.
Yeah, so a couple things. What I was initially going to mention, this gives us another picture of what Abinthy described way back when, is whatever he chooses to do, he's going to be fucking great at it.
Yeah.
So he invents a remarkable piece of engineering. And this chapter very much displays what we've come to expect from Kvothe, but we still get it as a bit of a surprise just how much ingenuity he is able to show, and the judgment he's able to show, the problem solving he's able to show, to work it out and to actually, blow some nips off of old Kilvin here.
Yeah, and you also too, like, you get later on, like when he tries to come up with a second and third and fourth idea. Like when he tries to come up with additional ideas, can't come up with anything any good. He can't figure it. He's like, everything he thinks of has either already been done or just doesn't work. And so when he really hammered down, Kilvin was like, you need to come up with something dope. And he's like, okay. Well, then he hunkered down and he came up with something dope. But then when he's just kind of doing it to try to do something else, and he's not like, there's no pressure to it or anything like that, he can't come up with anything. So it's not like he's just like super genius and he's just gonna fucking rattle off one invention after another. He's like, he hit the jackpot here and he he can't come up with anything else after this, at least in the second book when he gets back to the university.
Yeah, I guess, is it because he's less focused?
I think probably he's not prioritizing it. He's not as desperate. So, and Kilvin's not, putting the pressure on him. And so I think it's a combination of those things.
Less having to prove himself.
Yeah. So I think it's, this was just kind of a perfect situation where Kilvin was pressuring him. He needed the money. He was trying to impress Kilvin. Combination of those things. Whereas once he's kind of in a comfortable spot and he doesn't need the money and he's just kind of doing it, he's just tinkering around, then he's struggling to come up with a really good idea. It's just more like he's not like this super genius that just nails everything. It's like if he's not focused on something, he's going to struggle just like anybody else.
Yeah.
If he's not but when he does focus in on something, he goes to a different level.
So I like when they go through like, how does it work? How do you reset it? It's all very practical. And he shows them all the working parts. And yeah, again, I mean, that's one of the genius things about it is it's all very practically put together. The way that it works, the fact that it swings on a pivot means that, a very good shot that it's going to spin and you're likely going to get another chance for it to hit an area that hasn't been set.
Yeah, that was that was an interesting part of it. The way they did it is like because he's like when the arrow comes in, triggers the bear trap thing, and that one of the plates stops it, and he's like, "What? How did it stop the second one?" And this was something where he was like in his head, he's like, "This was a happy accident that whatever when an arrow's coming in, it happens to just spin the arrow catch to." He says one of the one of the untriggered plates.
Yeah, because it hangs on a pivot ring. So the shock of the first arrow sets it spinning slightly, which brings a new spring into alignment. But he does say even if it hadn't, the energy of the incoming arrow tends to swing it around to the nearest untriggered spring, like a weather vane.
Yeah, so
pointing to the wind.
So it just it moves to counteract the arrow, and he hadn't planned on that. He's like, that was a happy coincidence. He's like, I'm not going to tell Kilvin, but
yeah, obviously, yeah. And then when he shows him like how to reset it and all that stuff, he's like, oh, it's heavy. It needs to be sturdy. Crossbow bolt can punch through a 2-inch oak plank. I need the spring to snap back with at least 3 times that much force to stop the arrow. So they're just talking about like the physics of it. And then Kilvin goes as far as, what if the arrowheads are made of metal? The V-Sembi raiders are said to use arrows of flint or obsidian. So he brings this up where it's like, well, it's funny the way
plays
Kvothe
it well
plays
too.
It. Yeah, I was going to say he does a trooper deal here where he's like, well, if the arrowheads aren't some sort of iron, the arrow catch wouldn't trigger when they come within 20 feet. And then Kilvin gives a non-committal grunt and set the arrow catch back down on the table with a thump. But when it came within 15 feet, any piece of sharp stone or glass would trigger a different set of bitings. And he taps his schema. I was proud of it, as I'd always had the foresight to inscribe the inset pieces of obsidian with the sigildry for twice tough glass. Sorry, as I'd also had the foresight. That way they wouldn't shatter under the impact. So yeah, he's that's where he blows the nips off, right?
Yeah, he's like, good. What if the arrow has a head of bone or ivory? The runes for bone aren't trusted to lowly Relar like myself, I said. And if they were, Kilvin asked, then I still wouldn't use them, I said. Lest some child doing a cartwheel triggers the arrow catch with a thin, quickly moving piece of his skull. Kilvin nodded his approval. I was thinking of a galloping horse, but you show your wisdom in this. You show you have the careful mind of an artificer. That said, Master Kilvin, at 10 feet, a fast-moving cylindrical piece of wood will trigger the arrow catch, I sighed. It's not a good link, but it's enough to stop the arrow or at least deflect it. Kilvin bent to examine the schema more closely, his eyes wandering the crowded page for a long couple of minutes. All iron, he asked? Closer to steel, Master Kilvin. I worried that iron would be too brittle in the long term. But, yeah, he's definitely blowing his nips off because, like, any of the, like, what about this? What about this? What about this? Mm-hmm. And he has got answers for it. And it's not only effective against one type of arrow, it's effective against multiple different things. And you would have to have not only a bone tipped arrow, you'd have to have a bone shaft as well to not trigger this thing. So it would be extremely unlikely that if someone was shooting arrows, that this arrow catch wouldn't have any defense against it. It's going to stop most arrows.
Yeah, it's pretty ingenious. He said he even had 18 bindings on each of the springs. Where Kilvin's like, well, that's a great duplication of effort. Some might say a thing is overbuilt. He's like, yeah, I only care what you think. But it's great though too, because Kilvin takes it down the path of, okay, So what about this? What about this? What about this? And then it's, first of all, why make it? So then they think out the, the not philosophical, but the practical reasoning. Why make something? And that goes back to, did you make something good badly or bad goodly? That sort of
it comes to like what's your motivation? Why would you do this? Yeah. And so he was just like, no one deserves to, die by getting shot with an arrow while traveling on the road, which makes sense for a trooper to think of something like this. It makes perfect sense that Kvothe would think of this, given his upbringing. So it adds another level of cleverness to what Rothfuss did, that this is what he thought of. And then Kilvin said, what was his second? Where'd you get the flat bow? And he tells him, that he got it from a Gaelic, basically. He procured it illegally. And Kilvin admonishes him for that. And he's like, before you made a good thing, or a bad thing in a good way, this time you made a good thing in a bad way. Better is a good thing in a good way. So he admonishes him, not too hard, and then he's just like I'll take the crossbow and we'll say it's mine. We'll say I loaned it to you. And then we'll just put it in the whatever that for the stocks for other people to use. So Kvothe's not able to sell it, but ends up with what Kilvin does for him. It ends up making that a meaningless trivial thing. Then
he does go as far though as saying, like, next time just ask and I can get these sorts of things if you need them.
Yeah.
I like what Rothfuss did here, that when he does take it, tells him in the future, let me know if you need such things. That stung a bit, as I'd been planning on selling it back to Sleet. Still, it could have been worse. The last thing I wanted was to run afoul of the Iron Law. So it gives us a little piece there about what
so
is
the
about
next
to
chapter.
happen.
Yeah, the very next chapter. And then third, I see no mention of gold wire or silver in your schema. And
Catches
so
him.
Yeah, he caught him on that. Like he immediately, he like that's how quick his mind is. He's like looking through this and he's like, you asked for gold and silver. I don't see where gold and silver would even come into play, not even as experimentation. And so he's like, he immediately knew what was up. So Kvothe came clean. He's like, yeah, I used it like a money lender. I used you like a money lender. He's like, all right, well, not only are you going to pay it back, you're going to pay me interest. You're going to use me like a money lender. I'm going to charge you interest like a money lender. And then you're going to work in the stocks like Basil and the other guy that pissed Kilvin off. And that didn't tell him about the frost on the bone tar. Jackson, yeah. Jackson and Basil. So he makes him work the stocks, and he's like, if anybody asks, you'll tell them what you did. And then he was like, fourth, our last, Kilvin said, turning to lay one huge hand on the arrow catch. What do you imagine such a thing would sell for, Relar, Kvothe? My heart rose in my chest. Does that mean you approve it for sale, Mr. Kilvin? The great bear-like artificer gave me a puzzled look. Of course I approve it, Relar Kvothe. It's a wondrous thing. It's an improvement to the world. Every time a person sees such a thing, they will see how artificery is used to keep men safe. They will think well of all artificers for making of such a thing. So he's extremely happy with what Kvothe did. He recognizes this is a tremendous invention. And even though he is that kind of guy that he's going to admonish you for the things you did wrong, but he's also going to praise you for the things you did right. And he's going to give you the proper amount of praise.
It does also seem like he's kind of giving his mantra here. Or like the goal of the fishery is to make things that people will look back and be like, wow, the university is such a wonderful place that they can provide us with these things.
Yeah. Yeah, it shows his character.
Yeah. Well, his role, like how he sees the role of the artificery to the world itself. And that's why he gives all these moral lessons to Kvothe. I mean, that's part of it, right? I mean, it fits in his character where he talks about that all the time, where it's like, but, he lays that on him a lot, that moral compass.
Yeah, and then so he asked him how much we should charge for it, and Kvothe's like, how much is your lung worth? And he's like, well, my lung's quite valuable. Let's think of it in other terms though. And he's like, how? It's like the equipment to make it costs however much, and he's like, roughly 9 jots. Am I correct? Uncannily correct, I nodded. And so he asked how many hours it made, and then he's like, all right, let's say 25 talents. He's like, does that sound like a fair price? And he's like, it was 6 times more than I'd earned working on deck lamps, almost a ridiculous amount of money. I began to agree enthusiastically, then a thought occurred to me. Though it pained me, I slowly shook my head. Honestly, Master Kilvin, I'd prefer to sell them more cheaply than that. Raised an eyebrow. They will pay it, he reassured me. I have seen people pay more for less useful things. 25 talents is a lot of money, I said. Safety and peace of mind shouldn't be only available to those with a heavy purse. I think 8 would be a great plenty. Kelvin looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. As you say, 8 talents. He ran his hand over the top of the arrow catch, almost petting it. However, as this is the first and only one in existence, I will pay you 25 for it. It will go in my personal collection. He cocked his head and grinned at me. And Sava? Len, I said gratefully, feeling a great weight of anxiety lift off my shoulders. My one problem with this, and this is something a lot of fantasy writers do, is they have an idealistic view of how they think things should work. But here's the problem. So if you set it at 8 talents, here's what would happen in a realistic world. Is if you underpriced it and it's worth more than that, people would pay 25 talents for it. A guy like an Ambrose or anybody with money or like a Sleet or someone like that, it's just when that thing comes out, they're going to go and they're going to buy it. They're going to buy it for 8. They're going to buy every single one of them for 8. And they're going to clean up the market for them. They're going to buy all of them immediately. And they're going to stack these things. And then they're going to sell them for 25. So there's going to be an underground market for it. There's always going to be a shortage of arrow catches coming from the university. You're going to have to go to someone else and buy it on the black market for the 25 talents to get one, because there's going to be people who are going to buy up the entire supply because they're going to see that they could sell it for more, that you're underpricing your product. And I can buy it cheaply. I can buy it for 8 and I can sell it for 25. It's just free money. That's what would happen in a realistic society. There's no way around that. Like, you would have to get so gangster, like only one per person. And, and you would have to have a way to devise where a guy like Sleet couldn't just send, 15 people at a time to check every day for arrow catches. Like, you'd have to just get so gangster with ways and penalizing people for reselling it. And so, like, to come up with this, like, generous, like, I get the thought on it. It's like, I want to sell for cheap, but the market will drive the price. And so the problem with, like, selling it for too cheap is someone is going to consume all the supply. And the only way to stop that is to get very gangster and penalizing a black market. And then that market it's just going to become more valuable and more dangerous and more violent. So it just doesn't make any sense. It's not going to work. So, like, I get the idea behind it and the reasoning behind it, but it's not a system that makes any kind of sense economically. It would not work in a realistic world without you'd have to get severe penalties for selling it for more than 8 or for procuring more than 1 or something along those lines. Well, and you'd have to just be very brutal.
Well, and then enforcing those penalties creates cost, right? And then also, I mean, the other thing we don't get a clear read on is they say 9 jots, but they also don't quantify the amount of the time that it takes. And if you're underpricing that time, that also, again, that wouldn't work either.
Well, even if it's profitable at 8, that doesn't matter if, like, you're the only supplier of it. If you're the only people who can supply it, it could be profitable at 8. But like, if you think of it like this, like if a gas station priced their gas at a penny, yeah, you're going to have a lot of fucking customers, but you're going to sell out and you're not going to be able to meet the demand. You're going to constantly be sold out. And so it doesn't work. You have to, there is a, supply and demand is a thing that, a lot of fantasy writers don't have a full grasp of how supply and demand work.
Well, on the gasoline thing, you just fill up trash cans with gas, right?
Yeah.
And then you just
you sell them on the side of the road. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, hey, you guys want gas?
Yeah.
That's a trash can filled with gas.
Yeah. Fucking selling gas on the side. It's a fucking great side job.
Yeah, it's
not
a
even
funny,
not even filling up like canisters of gas, like filling up trash cans of gas.
Huh.
Like, how are you filling the cars up? It's such
Good
a
luck.
ridiculous fucking premise.
Yeah.
Hilarious though.
It is hilarious. Yeah,
but,
it's interesting
ignoring,
that trying to shove that idealism in there. But
yeah,
what he's trying
it's
to
not realistic. It's annoying. It's kind of like one of those things where it's like I always wonder because I don't know. I know much more about economics than I do, like, say, physics. And so, like, I'm always curious if, like, people who are really knowledgeable about physics, if when they're reading shit, they're just constantly being like, nah, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, it doesn't, like, throw me out of the story. I just read that and I'm like, nah, that wouldn't work. I can spot the holes and why that wouldn't work immediately. But if you don't think about it in depthly on, why, a black market would prop up, then it just kind of rolls off your back. So I'm curious if, like, other subject matters like physics and that kind of stuff, or like horseback riding or those kind of things, like people who are really knowledgeable about those subjects, when authors talk about them and they're not super knowledgeable about them and they're talking about it on a surface level, how many mistakes they're making that I just don't recognize because I'm not knowledgeable on those subjects.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I will say that what he is trying to accomplish here is making Kvothe more, because he's even reluctant to do it initially, but making Kvothe more virtuous when it comes down to it, and then also Kilvin being super cool and generous as well as appreciative, and showing all of that with hooking him up with 25 talents.
Yeah. And I wouldn't even it wouldn't even be something that would cross my mind as an issue if it's not when he gets back to the university and Basil's like, hey, smart thing for pricing it at 8, like it was like a functional system. It's like no, that's not how shit would have worked. That's unrealistic. I mean, magic's unrealistic and all that. I was like, but this is like, defying gravity. I mean, you're just defying, these are things that there are consequences to, prices. Like, I mean, this is not a arbitrary mechanism. Like I know a lot of people don't understand how prices work, but it's not arbitrary.
Well, people also don't want to believe that. They want to think that the gas stations are all screwing them. They want to think that, every time there's supply and demand,
and granted, like if you have monopolies and that kind of stuff, you can get screwed over. People can, fuck you over without competition to drive, if someone else can't sell it for lower and you prevent someone from selling it lower, then yeah, someone can, fuck you over. So you can run into those situations, but this isn't one of them. It's a system that wouldn't work the way as described without explaining that they had to get extremely violent against anybody who tried to, buy up the supply and sell it for more.
Yeah.
But it's a minor thing. It doesn't really like detract from me on the story. It's just I point it out because it happens in so many fantasy books.
Speaking of something that's unrealistic, at the end, it reminded me of a time that I was unrealistic when he goes through the remainder of the day grinning and whistling like an idiot. It is, as they say, a heavy purse makes for a light heart. There was a point in time where I'd written a screenplay when I first came to LA, And one of the guys was like, yeah, Miramax is interested. Which, come to find out, that was way more than what was actually going on. And I was like walking around for half a day like, I'm killing it. First thing I try to write out here in LA, and I'm going to get this shit bought up and made. I'm fucking slaying dragons over here. That's not what happened. The guy that said that was apparently like a drunk, and he was just speaking out of his ass. And that was it.
Yeah.
The guy from Miramax. Yeah. I never met that dude, but yeah, that was basically what came of it. But I got an afternoon where I felt really good about myself.
Yeah.
Until
that's what counts. That's the most important thing. So you want to feel real good about yourself and just ignore reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's better to feel good.
Yeah, it's better to feel good than, actually live realistically.
Yeah, or think about like the consequences.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Oh, I was going to say, though, also when he's like, hey, for 25 talents, you can have the original, and just gives him, his work, which seems to say a lot about Kvothe. I don't know if boldness is the right word, but also belief in his own memory, because if he's going to reproduce these...
Well, it's not like Kilvin's going to burn the original or never let him see it again.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, if he's thinking long-term, he should be like, I should tuck these aside. I'm going to be pretty famous. And, an autographed copy of my original schema, might fetch a pretty penny.
Well, and who knows? He could be living with the mayor all the way out there, and they don't have access to these things yet. And now he can start up his own little business if he needed to.
Yeah.
If he gets in a bind, he can make
he should have made some arrow catches before he head out on the road.
Good idea.
With the bandits.
That would have been really useful. Really, really useful.
You would think useful. like he would have thought of that when like he was hearing stories about bandits. Like he would have been on the road. I should hook this dude up with some arrow catches to give his men.
Yeah, or when he headed out and he's looking for bandits on his own.
Especially then. But that kind of popped up on him at the last moment. It didn't like he had a lot of time to prepare. He was drunk in his room, after he just got done fighting with Denna, and the mayor comes in when he's fucking blitzed and like, all right, need you to fucking hit the road. And he's not even like doing his best thinking. He's drunk, and so he's not thinking clearly. Right. And like, yeah, this is like where he's like, have you ever gone from drunk to hungover and like gone through the entire process? He's like, that's that's what I did. It's like normally you sleep through that part. He's like, I was awake for it all.
Yeah, that's got to be a pretty odd feeling. I mean, I've gone from drunk to sober, obviously, and it's quite tiring. Your body kind of wants more of that sugary alcohol to throw back in and keep this party going.
Yeah, that's why once you start, you just don't stop.
Yeah, never,
ever.
Right.
Again.
So you've just been drunk. You're constantly drunk forever.
That's all I drink. All I drink is beer.
All day, Jesus. You're one dehydrated son of a bitch.
Yeah. No, I think there's water in beer. Like I like the condensation.
Yeah. I think still you're going to be running the risk of some severe dehydration if that is all you're drinking.
Hey, it's worked for me for this long. I don't think there's going to be any negative consequences down the line.
You just need that Braden beer, right? Just a lot of that.
Yeah.
Right, a lot of the Braden beer.
Fish oil beer. So good.
Ugh, that's so gross.
Shove some bread and fish oil in my beer. But next week we will get to Kvothe getting arrested, brought up on charges by the Iron Law for using the name of the wind against Ambrose. Ambrose tries to get his revenge against him. Then he gives truncated version of the story, and Chronicler is peeved over that. He wants the full story. He feels like Kvothe owes it to him, and Kvothe won't give it to him. Yeah.
He gets all emotional about it. It's pretty funny. He gets really butthurt.
Yeah.
Hey, man, have you talked about this with other people? Hey.
I'm a piece of paper. My hand's all cramped, and you already told this story? Yeah, settle down, buddy.
It's pretty funny. Yeah, it's good stuff. But yeah, and then also, yeah, it's always with Ambrose, man. It's always I got these henchmen to do what I want, what I need people to do. He's always calling up, he's always telling. He's a big tattletale, old Ambrose.
Yeah, so that'll be a big part of it.
Really
I don't know how far we'll get, but we're getting towards the end of his time at the university. Probably we'll get out of the university in the next episode, I would guess.
Yeah, it feels like it comes up
in
pretty
the one after that, we'll be out of the university and into I don't know, in at least 2 episodes we'll be at least getting to the mayor.
Right on. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to talk about that because we've been at the university for quite a few episodes. Like, it took us a while to get to the university. It took us like 10 episodes. And we've been here now, what is this, 34? So from like at least 10 to 34, we've been at the university.
Wow. Well, we talk about these things, but it's pretty great to get to the ADEM part. I always look forward to it, man. I mean, initially, when I got to this point, once the Iron Law comes up, you're like, wait, what the fuck? And then you find out what it's about, and you're like, okay. And then once you're like, he's going to leave, I'm like, well, wait, what? Like, I'm not ready for that. Like, I want to still do this. What are we doing, man? Then where are you going to go? Where are you going to take me? And that's fucking awesome.
My favorite part is the fight with the mercenaries and his time in the Fae. Like, that section there before he got. I love the time with the mayor and I love the time with the ADEM, but as far as the rest of the book is concerned, my favorite part is that section from just before when he's kind of growing a relationship with Tempe. Then they find the bandits, they fight the bandits, and then he meets Florian, spends time with Florian, the Kvothe. Like, that whole section is one of my favorite of the book. And of what we got left, that's probably my favorite part that we got left.
The changes he goes through is just super interesting. Like, picturing how he is when he comes out of the Fae. He's a different person.
Yeah.
And he kind of has to, like, shake that off to a degree. And it starts to fade, but it's really interesting how he's definitely transformed and people see it. We get to some more.
Yeah, it comes out, man. He's super Mac.
Well, and it's
no more missing signals.
Well, it's so interesting how, as much as he's Rue, so he's not used to being around nobility. He has the background from his mother, so he really gets his ego stroked pretty great with the mayor, right? I mean, there's a lot of complexity, there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of, he takes some big risks, but he does get basically his ego stroked, and because he pretty much thrives. He comes out of it looking really good, but then we get to the ADEM, and he gets chin checked hard. Like, suddenly you're not Billy Badass, dude. Not only that, you're kind of a jackass, and you're a savage. Not only
you're not Billy Badass, you're getting wasted by a little girl who just keeps punching you in the balls.
Yeah. It's man, it's great. So he has to wrap his mind around all that, and I love it, man. It's great. It's
a completely different environment from the rest of the book. I mean, the culture's different, the people are different, It's all great. I don't. The people who don't like these sections when he leaves the university, that really love the university and they don't like him leaving. It just opens the world up. It opens the world up, and it's so interesting. The different cultures, the different personalities, the different way people live. Like, you get more of the world. Like, you're getting such a small slice of the world at the university. Yeah. It's just it makes the books are better with seeing more of the world.
Well, and it's not just that the culture is different. It turns the world on its head. Just how different they are with how they communicate, how different they look at the world, how different they look at social structure. They look at it in a completely different way. They might as well be from another planet. We
Yeah,
don't
they
have
do seem
that
different. Like, why,
dichotomy where it's that far different.
it's not logical that the women would be better fighters. That doesn't make any sense in our world, because size and strength and speed,
Matters.
matter.
Yeah.
So, like, why are their women either faster or stronger or whatever? And then, like, is their mother's theory, is that correct? And for their culture, for their people, like, are they different physiologically? So yeah, there's a lot of interesting questions that arise from their culture.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. And then what it does to us and to Kvothe and how that broadens out the world. Yeah, I feel bad for people that that say they don't like those sections. I think that you're missing out so much. And to me it has to be, there's a closed-mindedness there, because the first time I read through them, I didn't have to try to like them.
No,
It didn't take effort on
people
my
like
part.
different things. So, I mean, some of it's obviously subjective, but I think some of the people who are like overly critical about it's, you run into this with stories. If the story doesn't go the way that some people want it to go, then they hate it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's true. I that's just not me at all.
I've seen
like
seen
to
it,
take the
like,
ride, I guess.
people who
Yeah.
absolutely despise the Red Wedding and things along those nature, because the story definitely did not go the way they wanted it to go.
Yeah.
And it went so far in a different direction that it infuriates them, where they hate it. They just absolutely hate it. And so I'm not like that. I have things where, like, I would like to see it go this way, and I can be disappointed it doesn't go in a way that I want it to, or something like that. But I'm not disappointed with the writing. It's more of like a disappointment with what the characters' choices they made, and which I think is interesting. I like to feel those things. I want to feel disappointed or frustrated with characters' decisions. I don't want to just agree with everything they do. I don't want them always doing what I want.
The Red Wedding is a very good example, because I would have rather that not happened because of characters that I like so much. But because it happened, it's the only time I've ever literally thrown a book across the room.
Yeah,
I mean, I got so emotionally invested and pissed, and like that's tremendous to do that to somebody from reading words on a page.
Yeah.
And they get that vehemently reacting. It's not vehement. It's just literally, reacting in that sort of way is incredible, and it's so memorable.
Yeah, those kind of things, you chase those moments from then on.
Absolutely.
Like, you chase them, and I want to feel that again. I haven't, but I want to.
Yeah, I'm in for the ride, but I hear you. I mean, especially there are plenty of movies and television shows where I feel that I have a less vested interest, and they don't pull you in nearly as much as literature does. So there are many cases I can think of where shows went away. I didn't want it to go at all, and I even stopped watching. I haven't done that with a book.
It always depends. Is it bad writing, where I don't like the directions the writers took it in, or is it that I disagree with the characters? Because if I disagree with the characters, then I'm still into the story, and I'm looking at it through the characters' eyes. If I start looking through the writer's eyes, and I'm questioning the decisions the writers made, then that's when they lose me.
Well, that's when shows and movies fall apart. Yeah. It's bad writing.
Yeah.
You can't make...
You don't have to agree with the characters' decisions, but you have to understand. You don't want to start, like, thinking about what the writers are doing, because then you're not. They're pulling you out of the story. And then you're like, oh, they made holes. That this doesn't make any sense, and things along those lines. It pulls you out of the story. And so if there's too many of those moments, then it doesn't work. But just characters not doing what you want, yeah, that's a good storytelling. That's got to happen.
Yeah, I guess it's a fair point what you said originally, is that, these things are subjective. It's hard for me because of how much I like these books, man. Like, it's hard. There's plenty of books I read in the past that I recommended to people, and then with their reactions, I stopped recommending them, because of how they reacted, I still wouldn't hesitate with these books. And if I recommend these books to somebody and they're just like, no, didn't like it at all, it's like, well, I don't know what to say.
Well, you're a stupid fucking idiot. I hate you. We're no longer friends. I don't want to lose my number. Don't ever call me again.
This is where we split.
Stupid moron.
Over a book I like that you don't. And that's it.
It's only appropriate reaction.
Yeah, that's not overkill.
No.
That's not overdoing it at all.
No, that's the appropriate reaction. So same thing with this podcast. If you recommend our podcast to someone and they don't like it, well, that person's a bad person. You shouldn't be friends with them.
Let's burn bridges over this.
Yeah. This podcast is definitely worth burning bridges over. For sure. But I think that's going to wrap it up for this week. We'll be back next week and get Kvothe fucking booted from the university for a while.
Right on.
All right. Peace out, folks.
Yep. See you.